Ahoy, mateys! Welcome to Podcasts of the Caribbean, a podcast covering the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, from the theme parks to the movies and everything in between. My name is Justin Helmer, and I will be your host on this voyage through the Caribbean. It'd be too late to alter course now, mateys. Hello and welcome back to Podcasts of the Caribbean. This is episode 49, and today we will be finishing The Price of Freedom by A.C. Crispin. This will be the fourth and final episode covering this book, and I have a feeling it will probably be the longest episode of the podcast so far. There is a lot that will be happening in these last few chapters, so buckle up. If you haven't listened to the previous 3 episodes I did covering this book, I recommend you listen to those first so you'll be caught up with everything that has happened so far. But just to refresh on what happened last time, Jack helped free Amenirdis' brother Shabako from a plantation in New Avalon, and then they encountered Borya Palachnik, who, if you remember, was one of the rogue pirates, and thanks to Amenirdis' spell, Borya's ship exploded, finally putting an end to the Russian rogue. Then, since Jack has Amenirdis and Shabako's bracelets, he only needs to get to Harka's bracelet, which is still in the possession of Christophe, who is also one of the rogue pirates. Jack made a deal with Christophe to sail with him to Zerzura, and that is where we pick up now. The Wicked Wench is only days away from reaching Zerzura, so let's dive back into the book and finish The Price of Freedom. So chapter 15 picks up with Amenirdis and her brother Shabako, and Amenirdis is sewing some clothes for her, Shabako, and Tarek to wear once they reach Zerzura. And Shabako comes up to her asking about where she was last night. To refresh your memory, Amenirdis has fallen in love with Jack and spent the night with him. Amenirdis tells him that her whereabouts last night are private and that he doesn't need to know, but he reinforces that he is Pharaoh, and he commands her to tell him the truth. At first, Amenirdis is scared to tell Shabako as she thinks he would have Jack killed or punished in some other way for sleeping with her. But as Shabako realizes that Amenirdis is starting to cry, he apologizes for being hard on her and at first assumes Jack took advantage of her. But Amenirdis tells him that it was her idea to go to him and that she was not seduced. She tells him that she loves Jack, and Shabako at first cannot understand why, as he is a white man and that white people have done so much damage to their own people. Amenirdis tells him that evil has no color, remembering Duke Renjon, the slaver who captured them. Shabako asks if Jack returns her feelings, and she says that it doesn't matter anyway, since they'll be home soon, and Jack will sail away, never to return. But at the very least, she will have the memory, and that is enough. Shabako understands this, as he tells her that there was a female slave at Wickhaven, which was the plantation he was on, that he fell in love with. The female slave was expecting, but she died in childbirth, and the child was stillborn, so Shabako never found out if it was a boy or a girl. But Shabako tells her that his first order as pharaoh will be to free all of Kerma's slaves. Amenirdis tells him it will not be an easy process, and that they need to create a plan. She explains the plan to him, and Shabako is impressed as to how much thought she put into it, and he tells her that once he is crowned pharaoh, he will appoint Amenirdis as his grand vizier. She tells him that she will think about it and give him an answer after he is crowned. That night, Amenirdis is in Jack's cabin again, and as they lay together, they look up at the skylight in the ceiling of the cabin. Jack asks her if she has ever been inside the labyrinth, and she tells him she was once when she was young, but she begins to describe it to Jack. So let's jump into the book here. So Jack says, "What was it like, love?" "My father took my brother and me inside with him. The high priest went with us, and he led the way. I remember the walls and floors, all built of pale gray stone, very smooth to the touch. But the ceilings, they were different. I've never seen anything like them. We have nothing like them in the temple or the palace. What were they like? The ceilings were made from some kind of different stone. It was like quartz, but it gave off light. You could see without carrying a torch, which was a good thing, because priests say fire will not spark within the labyrinth. Torches don't work? No, it is a part of the protective spell. No sparks at all," Jack mused. "That's interesting. Why are you—" Aisha caught his meaning. "Oh, you're wondering whether you could fire your pistol in there. Right, love." She considered the question, then shook her head in the darkness. "I shouldn't think so, Jack. Pi always said it was just the way I repeated it to you. Fire will not spark. It takes a spark to fire a pistol. That's right, Jack said. So we'll have to rely on blades to overcome any adversaries. Tell me more about your journey through the labyrinth. I want to know all that you remember, love. I remember walking for what seemed like a long time. The high priest chanted as we went. We walked and walked. My legs grew tired, but I was proud of being a big girl, so I didn't want to complain. Shabako began to fuss about being tired, so my father picked him up and carried him. How old were you? 7, I think, she replied. Shabako would have been 4. She raised her head to look at him, though it was too dark to make out his features. In the Captain Ward book, Jack said, he reported that there were illusions and magical pitfalls put there when it was first built, traps that will bar anyone but the rightful users from finding the way to the center, where the Heart of Zerzura is located. Captain Ward said the stone rests on the outstretched palm of a life-sized golden statue of the lion god Apademak. Aisha nodded. Your Captain Ward was correct, Jack. I wonder how he discovered all this. I have no idea. The author of the book claimed that he was a pirate for 10 years, and maybe he was. It was published in England when I was just a little shaver. The pirate captains he mentioned in the book sailed the Spanish Main at least 30 years ago. One of the chapters in the book was titled Pirate Lore and Legends of Treasure. I read that part over and over when I was a boy, dreaming about finding it all and being the most famous pirate ever. The princess propped her head up on her left hand and began trailing her fingers in aimless patterns across his skin. She smiled in the darkness. I can picture you as a little boy, Jack, full of mischief. I'll bet you were constantly getting into scrapes. He laughed. I caused me share of trouble, love. At any rate, none of the old-timers I ran across remembered anyone on the account named Ward. That's not unusual. Many pirates don't use their real names. Really? Is Jack Sparrow your real name? As far as I know, it is. Never saw it ever recorded anywhere, of course. He shrugged. Where did you grow up, Jack? Who raised you? I grew up here and there, love. My first memory is of climbing up the ratlines to the yardarm and seeing the ocean all spread out. I was a cabin boy on many ships, visited lots of ports, and of course there was Shipwreck Cove, which was as close to home as any place was. That's the pirate's secret hideaway. It's an island, you know the kind, one of those places that's very hard to find unless you know where it is. And it's not always in exactly the same place, some of the old-timers claim. As for raising, he chuckled a bit hollowly, I more or less raised myself. She could tell the subject wasn't one he wanted to discuss, so Aisha dropped both her head and the subject, nestling a bit closer. No wonder there was an instant bond between us, Jack. We both hail from mysterious islands that cannot be found by ordinary people. Ha! His chest rose and fell beneath her ear as he snorted. Instant bond? What instant bond? You bloody hated me. Aisha kissed his chest, smiling. She moved her hand, running it down his side. No, I didn't. The first time I saw you, I thought you were quite good-looking. For a white man. You're trying to distract me, you minx, and don't think I don't know what you're doing, he said, trying in vain to capture her hand. It's working, too, she said, kissing his shoulder, then his cheek, searching until she found his mouth in the darkness. You are an insatiable enchantress, he muttered, his arms coming up to pull her closer. He rolled them over until he had her pinned down. You'll be the death of me, woman. You'll die happy. Some time later, when their quick breathing had eased, Jack murmured, So where were we, love? We were talking about the labyrinth and what Captain J. Ward said about it. Right. I need to know about the labyrinth, love, if I'm going to lead a foray into it. She sighed. Yes, you need to know. Apademak, he's your main god, right? Since ancient times, I suppose? There are a number of lesser gods, but yes, Apademak is special to us, and has been ever since my people left the city of Old Kerma in ancient Kush, just below the third cataract of the Nile. It was Apademak that gave us the heart, and told my ancestors to go west toward the setting sun. They obeyed. You saw his statue. What does he look like, Aisha? He is the lion god. He usually appears as a man with the head of a lion, wearing the triple crown. When my father saw him in a vision, he saw him as a huge lion, though. What did the room look like, where the statue stands? It's a big circular room, and there are 2 doors. We came in by one and left by the other. Stacked around the edges of the room was the treasure. There were many piles of it. Aisha, tell me more about the heart. It's a magical stone, a source of great power, right? So what exactly does the heart do? She raised herself up again, and her voice had gone low and intense. Jack, the heart is what keeps the people of Kerma safe. If the heart was ever taken or destroyed, we would all die. Die? He sounded startled. How? Aisha drew a deep breath. The heart is indeed a source of power. Every day, the temple priests renew the illusion spells. They are very strong. You'll see what they're like when we get there. The priests perform the spells, they say the chants, but the heart provides the power that makes them work. Without the stone, Kerma would be visible. Anyone could go there. She clenched her hand as it rested on his chest. Aisha could hear fear building in her voice. And you know what that would mean. Cutler Beckett and men like him would be lining up to drag us off to the new world in shackles. They have guns. We have spears and bows and arrows. We would fight, but they would win. He did not reply, but Aisha could tell he hadn't fallen asleep. Jack, she said urgently, I know that you had to strike a deal with Christophe to get him to come to Kerma. I know you told him you could get him into the labyrinth. He's a pirate. He wants treasure. I understand that. There are centuries worth of it just sitting there. Letting Christophe have some as the price of getting my father's bracelet back is worth it. And you can have some too, though I know my brother plans to keep his word and reward you and your crew for freeing him. But the heart must stay with the god in Zerzura, Jack. I understand, he said, after a pause. Do you? Her heart was pounding. Calm down, she thought. Your father said Apodemoc picked Jack, because he is a good man. Just keep remembering that. I can deal with Christophe, darling, he said. He's human, even if he is a double-dealing bloody snake. That's not what concerns me. I'm just wondering what about those illusions and pitfalls Captain Ward's book mentioned. I can deal with the illusions, Jack, so don't worry about them. You're not coming with us, love. It's apt to be too dangerous. It will be a whole lot more dangerous if you don't have me along, she said. Illusion can be very powerful, Jack. A strong enough illusion could lead you astray, even to your deaths. I know much more about this than you do. I know you do. Besides, she said, I'll be the only one that knows the sacred word that will allow us to pass through unharmed. They say the elements of nature, earth, air, fire, and water will bring down a swift death for those who do not know the word. What word is that? I don't know it yet, and I wouldn't tell it to you if I did. Only a few people traditionally know it. The high priest of the god's temple in Zerzura and his successor. Her voice thickened. Pi is dead, remember? His successor, Neja, will now become high priest, once I report Pi's fate. He may already have been declared high priest. I've been gone almost a year. So this Neja, he would know the word? Yes, and of course the pharaoh knew it, and the heir. So my brother must know it. So that gave us a lot of information about the labyrinth and how there are illusions and traps lurking around pretty much every corner, and also the fact that fire cannot spark in the labyrinth. This means that Jack cannot use his pistol in case Christophe betrays him again, so Jack needs to stay on guard. But the next morning, the Wicked Wench and Vipere reach a smudge not too far off in the distance. This smudge, of course, is the illusion that cloaks Zerzura from the rest of the world. Jack tries to look at it, but it's hard to even picture what it is. He at first thinks it's a bank of dark clouds, but then he sees it as remnants of a storm, and then maybe a rock jutting out of the water or even the dark-colored sandbar. Amenirdis, Shabako, and Tarek are all standing with Jack on the bow, and Jack takes out his spyglass to look closer into the fog. Amenirdis warns him not to, but Jack does it anyway, and when he looks into it, he becomes incredibly dizzy, and he almost throws up. Amenirdis tells Jack that he should warn the crew they will feel strange once they begin to pass through the mist, but they won't be harmed. Apparently, she can lessen the effects of the mist on the Wicked Wench, but Vipere will feel the full force of the mist, but both ships will make it through. So they near the illusion, and right before they go in, Jack goes and marks the bearings for Zerzura on his charts, just in case he decides to give them to Beckett. Once he makes his way back up into the quarterdeck, he immediately realizes they've entered the fog. There was no visible period of entering it, as one moment they weren't in it, and the next moment they were. But it is not real fog, so nothing is damp or wet. But Jack makes sure to keep his eyes moving, as keeping them in one place will cause the sickness he experienced a bit earlier. But let's see what everyone experiences in this fog. It was eerie, eldritch, uncanny, all of that and more. In addition to the grayness surrounding them, visible to their eyes, there seemed to be a faint hum in his head, an unpleasant drone that was occasionally pierced by muffled moans, or wails, or shrieks. The worst thing about the sounds was that he keeps thinking he recognizes the voices. People that he had known. People who were now dead. For just a second he thought he recognized old One-Tooth Tommy, but he could make out no words. He also thought he heard Farah Taharka's voice. The Wicked Wench plowed forward, as Lee Trafford, white-knuckled, kept her on course, glancing down at the binnacle every so often. Jack thought about asking Aisha, standing motionless by the ship's wheel, one finger resting on the nearest spoke, how far they would have to travel in this stuff, but a look at her face and body convinced him that distracting her would be a mistake. She was rigid with tension, the cords standing out on her throat. Jack had been keeping his eye on the hourglass, and Chamba, who had the duty of turning it. It took 14 minutes for the sand to run through it normally. When Jack watched the sand, it seemed to be pouring from the upper part of the glass into the lower part at the normal rate. But his perception of time was strange. He felt as though he had been stuck in this hellish grayness for half an hour, but a glance at the glass told him that only 7 or 8 minutes had passed. At the speed they'd been traveling before they entered the fog, that means that in another 2 or 3 minutes, they'd have traveled a mile. How wide was the expanse of fog they had to cross? Jack watched the sails. The Wench had all plain sail set, and the canvas was properly taut. There was wind blowing, the sails could feel it, and they were heeding its push, moving the ship forward. But he couldn't feel the wind on his face, nor on his hand when he held it up. He glanced down at Chamba, who was watching him. Jack tried to give the lad an encouraging smile. Chamba attempted to return it, but it looked more like a grimace of terror. Jack wondered what the former slave was seeing and hearing. Worse things than he was, probably. The last of the sand ran through the glass. Chamba turned it over. Lee Trafford glanced sideways at Jack. The captain tried to give the helmsman a reassuring nod. "Hurry up," Jack begged the ship. "Hurry up and end," he ordered the illusion fog. He looked back at Aisha and suddenly saw her draw a deep breath and relax. And just like that, the fog was gone. It was like snapping one's fingers. One moment there all around them, the next, simply gone. Before them lay perfectly ordinary blue water, under a lovely afternoon sky. In the distance, Jack could see the green of trees and vegetation, the gray rock of cliffs, and white specks studding the side of a tall hill. A low range of mountains appeared blue-gray from the distance. Jack heard Aisha gasp, and saw her expression, the look of a woman who was not sure whether to laugh or weep with joy. "Zerzura?" he asked. She nodded, speechless. "It won't take us long to sail into the harbor," Jack said. "You should go put on the clothes you made for your homecoming. And, Aisha?" She glanced at him. "Don't forget to take off your shawl. You want your people to recognize you." Aisha nodded. Then she was gone, picking up her cotton skirts and making her way down the ladder. He watched her hurry across the deck, thinking about their talk a week ago. At first, Jack had been concerned about how Shabako might react to him, or Tarek, for that matter, but both men appeared unchanged in their demeanor toward him. With part of his mind, he heard Robbie down on the weather deck, ordering the crew to adjust the sails, as Trafford reached the mouth of the harbor, and after a questioning glance at Jack, turned the Wicked Wench to approach the docks there. Jack headed down the ladder to look behind him. Vipere had made it through, also. Jack almost wished that Christophe and his brigantine had been lost in the hellish illusion fog. But if they had been, there'd be no way to get into the labyrinth now, would there? Jack sighed and wandered over to the railing. He'd read so much about the Heart of Zerzura, fantasized about it, thought about what it would be like to have something that would give him power and wealth. He knew full well that Christophe thought the heart was going to be his, but Jack would be damned if he let the rogue have it. So both ships make their way into Zerzura's harbor, and while they do so, Jack wonders about what would happen if he took the heart. Even if he didn't give the coordinates to Beckett, Karma would be visible without the heart, and Beckett would, without a doubt, find it on his own. Jack doesn't want to think about what would happen after that, so he dismisses the thought as Robbie comes up to him. They look out on the approaching dock, and they see an armed contingent of guards marching toward it. But before anything happens, Jack hears Tarek say something in Kerman, and Shabako and Amenirdis in her true form come out onto the deck in the clothes that she had sewn for their homecoming. The crew is shocked at this, as they, of course, had never seen Amenirdis with her natural appearance. We also see that Etienne de Ver and Lucius Featherstone are best friends now, which occurred after Etienne saved Lucius during the battle with Boria. The troops stop when they see the royals and Tarek on the deck of the ship, and the officer makes a ceremonial gesture toward them. A few hours pass, and we see Amenirdis with her mother, Queen T. And we see that Amenirdis finds everything somewhat strange now, as she became so accustomed to English homes and ship cabins over the past year. We see that Amenirdis is getting ready for the homecoming feast that will be happening that night, and Queen T summons a handmaiden to help Amenirdis dress. The handmaiden comes up as she is beckoned to get the princess ready, and we see that Amenirdis feels a knot in her stomach at the sight of her own slave, and how she is back to being on the other end of the slave and master relationship. Queen T doesn't even give the slave a second look, but she continues to speak as the slave gathers the clothes and jewelry. She tells Amenirdis that she cannot even believe what had happened to her and Shabako, being sold into slavery and everything else they had been through. Queen T is also mourning the loss of her husband Taharka and wondering how they can have a memorial for him without his body. Amenirdis tells her to explain to the people that he was lost at sea. The slave dressing her, who is named Senui, has Amenirdis sit down so she can put her sandals on. She then dresses her in an elaborate garment, and Amenirdis murmurs a thank you to her, which startles Senui. But the slave puts the heavy black wig on Amenirdis' head, and this is something similar to like the Egyptian wigs that were worn by women, if you're trying to visualize it. Senui then lines Amenirdis' eyes with coal, which is of course something Jack will do later, as he saw Esmeralda wearing it at the beginning of the book too. But Queen T is not sure why Amenirdis invited the Outlanders to the feast, meaning Jack, Robbie, and Chamba, as she believes they are strange-looking with ugly clothes and skin. Amenirdis tells her mother they are the ones who saved her and Shabako, and that they should be honored for doing so. Senui then puts Amenirdis' jewelry on, and we see Amenirdis wondering how she treated her slaves before she left, because when she politely tells Senui to switch the crown she was going to place on her head, the slave is surprised at first. She comes back with a slender gold circlet and puts it on. We see that Zerzura does not have mirrors like in the rest of the world. They only have large sheets of polished brass. But Amenirdis sees her reflection in the brass and knows that Aisha is truly and completely dead, and she is a little saddened by this. While Amenirdis is getting ready, Jack makes sure his crew is settled. The crew was permitted supervised shore leave so long as they slept aboard the Wicked Wench. Jack rows out to La Vipere and parlays with Christophe, and we see that Christophe is shaken up from the journey through the mist. Jack, of course, heard the voices of the dead, so he can only imagine how many voices Christophe heard. But Jack informs Christophe of what will be happening. If anyone aboard La Vipere tries to go ashore, the deal is off, and Jack will have his men shoot to kill if they do. They will then go into the labyrinth the day after tomorrow, and Jack will come for Christophe in a boat at dawn on that day. He also tells him that firearms will not work in the labyrinth, so all he needs to bring is Taharka's bracelet and a sword. Jack begins to row away before Christophe asks if he wants to come aboard for a drink, but Jack says no and tells Christophe to row back to La Vipere and stay there. Jack climbs back aboard the Wench and goes into his cabin, where he takes a short nip of rum before someone knocks on the door. Robbie and Chamba come in with the invitation to join the homecoming feast that night, and Jack reads it, seeing that Tarek will come and fetch them at sunset and escort them to the feast. Chamba tells Jack that Shabako will be sending him clothes for the feast, since they are about the same size, and we see that Shabako has been teaching Kerman to Chamba. Jack tells Robbie they will probably be looked at like they are in a wild beast show, but both of them get ready regardless. But once they are ready and waiting for Tarek, Jack and Robbie talk for a bit, so let's go back into the book here. So Robbie says, "Whoever could have predicted we'd be here, getting ready to eat dinner with royalty that have lived on this island as their ancestors lived, since long before our lord was born." "Your lord, Robbie," Jack reminded him. His first mate smiled. "Any time you want to borrow my Bible when you run out of reading material, just say the word, Jack." "Thanks, but no thanks, mate. I'd rather spend me leisure time, as little there is of it, thinking about what I'm going to buy with my share of what Prince Shabako gives us, as well as anything else I can carry out of the labyrinth." "What will be the first thing you buy?" Robbie asked. "I'm betting I know." "Go ahead, guess," Jack said. "We're standing on it," Robbie said. "You'll try to get Mr. Beckett to sell you the Wicked Wench." "You know me too well, mate." Jack glanced at the lowering sun. "It won't be easy. I have to do it through a solicitor, I expect. Set up some kind of fake shipping company or something. Beckett certainly won't want to sell her to me when I come back from Zerzura, telling him I never found Kerma, and that I don't have the bearings for the island. Is that what you're planning to do, Jack? Lie to Beckett?" "The thought has crossed me mind, Robbie," Jack said lightly. "Mr. Beckett rather rubbed me the wrong way last time we spoke. He made some threats. I don't like threats." "But Jack," Robbie said, and there was suddenly fear in his blue eyes, "you'll have to give him the bearings. You can't just lie to a man like Beckett and expect him to swallow it. I'm a pretty convincing liar, Robbie, Jack reminded him. Yes, but Jack, you're not the only one who knows the bearings. Frank and I can navigate. Not as well as you can, but we can manage. I doubt I could lie convincingly to Beckett, Jack. And with that thug Mercer standing by, he shook his head and swallowed. I wouldn't even try. I know. And no matter what I decide to do, Robbie, I'll not expect you to lie. Or Frank, either. Not to Beckett, and certainly not to Mercer. That brute scares me, too, with those black gloves. Jack shrugged. I'm not sure how it'll all work out, Robbie, but I trust Amenirdis. We discussed this problem, and I told her my concerns about Beckett and Mercer. What can she do about it? No illusion will help this, and she can't blow them up, can she? Robbie stared at him doubtfully. No, Jack said with a wry smile. Though it would be handy if she could, wouldn't it? I can't tell you exactly what she's planning, but she swore to me by her God that neither you nor Frank nor any other crew member would suffer or come to harm because they rescued her or Shabako or Tarek. I have no idea how she plans to arrange this, but I believe her, mate. Robbie considered this. All right, Jack. After seeing what she did to Borya's ship, I have considerable trust in that lady, too. Jack nodded. It's possible Beckett will fire me. And if he does, Robbie, I'll be glad to see the last of Calabar. When I first met Cutler Beckett, I thought he was such an upstanding gentleman. He shook his head. In his own way, Beckett's as bad as Borya. He just does it all without getting his hands dirty. I'm surprised he let you sail off without sending Mercer along to keep you in line, Robbie mused. I think he did send someone to report to him, Robbie. Robbie thought for a moment. Newton? The carpenter's mate who showed up so conveniently? Yep. I wondered about him from the beginning, but I really began to wonder when I noticed that every time when the man went on shore leave, he was posting letters. It's always possible Newton was writing to his mum, I suppose, but never yet met a sailor that wrote to his dear old mum from every port of call. If my mum was still alive, I'd send her letters from every port, Jack. Robbie, mate, don't take this wrong, but you're not your run-of-the-mill sailor. True. Getting press-ganged isn't the same thing as choosing a profession. Before that happened, I'd always figured I'd be a farmer like my dad. I like the farm. Jack shuddered. No offense, Robbie, but I'd rather be keel-hauled than live in one place, mucking out cow buyers and standing at the stern of a bloody ox while wrestling a plow through the mud from dawn till sunset. Robbie chuckled, as did Jack. This was an old dispute, one they'd hashed over many times, without reaching any solution other than to agree to disagree. If you want the Wicked Wench, Jack, you'll figure out a way, the first mate said. You've loved this ship since the first moment you saw her. I've never seen you look at a woman the way you look at her. She's a good ship, Robbie, Jack said, running a finger along the railing, as though the wood were soft, yielding flesh. Robbie smiled. I think you and the wench were meant to be together, Jack. One of those pairs people say in the same breath, like Adam and Eve, King Arthur and Excalibur, Robin Hood and Maid Marian. Jack Sparrow and the Wicked Wench. Jack looked at him in surprise. What a romantic, Robbie. Never knew you had it in you, but before you know it, you'll be writing ruddy poetry. Robbie shrugged. Some things are just obvious, Jack. The Wicked Wench is like your pearl of great price. Pearl? It's from the Bible, Jack. A parable Jesus told his disciples about a merchant who saw a perfect pearl, the most wonderful, beautiful one in the whole world, but very costly. The merchant had to have this thing that was so perfect, so he sold everything he had so he could possess it. It's in the Gospel according to Matthew. Jack took a long look at the ship from bow to stern. Then he nodded and smiled at his friend. By Jove, I know just how the chap felt, Robbie. Most of the Bible stuff you tell me about doesn't make much sense to me, but this story does. A pearl of great price. That's this ship to me. Robbie shook his head slowly. No, Jack, that's not what the story means. It's a parable about how one gets into heaven. Jack waved a hand dismissively. Don't ruin it, Robbie. I like the story. First Bible story you ever told me that I liked. Be happy, mate. So after this, Chamba comes up wearing some of Shabako's clothes, and he looks like a Zerzuran with the clothes that he's wearing. Tarek then comes and escorts them to the feast, and on the way, Tarek points out different landmarks in the city. They make their way into the palace, and they go up a few ramps before they emerge onto a rooftop area. And I also love how all the Zerzurans are talking and mingling, and right when Jack, Robbie, and Chamba show up, everyone just stops and stares at them. Tarek informs them that they have never seen white people before, and after an awkward moment, everyone goes back to what they were doing, and Tarek goes and gets them some wine as they wait for the royals to arrive. Once the royals are announced, Tarek leads Jack and the others to where they will be sitting, which is at one of the tables near the head table where the royals will be sitting. Jack also sees Amenirdis decked out in all her royal finery, and she is beautiful, of course, but almost not alive, and Jack thinks that she looks like a doll. He much prefers her as she was last night when she was in his cabin with him. But Robbie is astounded at the finery of everything since he has never seen anything so rich, as he describes it. Dinner is finally served, and we see that Zerzura has not developed forks or spoons, so they only use knives. But they cut their food and then they scoop it onto pieces of spongy bread, which is then rolled up and eaten. One of the people who is sitting near Jack, who is a man named Samtik, musters up the courage to talk to Jack, and Tarek translates for them. He asks Jack if he likes their city, and Jack tells him how it is different from any other place he has been before. After the meal, Amenirdis makes her way over to Jack, and she admits to him that it has been difficult readjusting to life in Zerzura, as she believes herself to be a different person now. She tells him that tomorrow, Shabako will be crowned pharaoh and address the people from the balcony of the temple. She also tells him Shabako will announce that all the slaves in Kerma will be freed a year from tomorrow. Jack likes this news, and she tells him that she will be appointed Grand Vizier by Shabako. She already has many ideas about how to improve Zerzura, including having people learn to make black powder and tempered steel. This will allow them to make guns and cannons to better defend themselves. After this, she informs Jack that Shabako doesn't know the sacred word to use in the labyrinth. Jack asks about Pi's successor and if he knows it, but apparently he died 6 months ago and had not named a successor since he believed Pi would return. So Amenirdis assumes it must be an old Kerman word, but Queen T interrupts them with a condescending look toward Jack. He has Amenirdis translate for him, and he thanks the Queen for a lovely evening, and he bows to them both and takes his leave. The next day, Jack and Chamba are among the crowd of people eagerly awaiting Shabako's first address to his people. The new pharaoh walks out onto the balcony and quiets everyone before speaking. Chamba translates for Jack, and after the opening pleasantries, Shabako announces they will begin to slowly free all the slaves in Kerma. Some of the people in the crowd are confused by this, but Shabako explains his reasoning and also shows his back, which bears scars from being lashed. After he finishes his address, he makes his way back into the temple, and part of the crowd cheers, while the other part begins to shout in protest. Jack and Chamba begin to make their way back to the wench, but Chamba has something to tell Jack. So I'm going to read this little excerpt from the book here. Captain Sparrow, I've been meaning to tell you something. Now be as good a time as any, I reckon. All right, Jack said. Captain, when you leave, I won't be coming with you. Shabako, he told me what he'd be planning last week. I've been thinking about it hard, and I know what I need to do. So yesterday I asked him to let me stay here on Kerma and help him free the slaves. Shabako said I can stay. Jack sighed. He'd been rather expecting this. I'll be sorry to lose you, Chamba, he said. You've been a good and reliable hand, but I respect your decision, lad. Thank you, Captain Sparrow. Don't worry that I'd be forgetting you. I won't. I won't either. I have to keep going before I get emotional, but oh man, what a touching moment between Jack and Chamba. But later that night, Jack is in his cabin and he hears a knock on the door. Jack opens the door and sees Tarek there, and he tells Jack that if he wants to see Amenirdis tonight, he should come with him. So the two of them make their way to the palace, and Tarek gives Jack a cloak to put on before they go inside. They go through some corridors and up a few ramps before they reach Amenirdis' room. Tarek tells him that he will be back before dawn to lead him back through the palace. Jack then opens the door and walks in, and he sees Amenirdis devoid of jewelry and makeup, only wearing the nightgown that she had made while on board the wench. And you can guess what they do that night. But chapter 16 begins with Jack getting up early to dress himself to make sure he leaves on time. But Amenirdis wants to walk down with him, so she gets ready and they meet up with Tarek, who leads them out of the palace. They make their way down to the harbor, where Jack goes to pick up Christophe. But before he does so, he asks Amenirdis to do something for him, and we won't find out what this is until later. But Jack goes and gets his supplies, and then picks up Christophe, and the four of them make their way toward the Temple of Apademak. They go all the way down until they reach a door made of carved stone. Tarek will wait outside the labyrinth to make sure no one else comes down there, and Jack, Amenirdis, and Christophe will all go inside. Since Amenirdis could not find out the sacred word they will need later, she wrote down the names of all the old pharaohs and queens that ruled Kerma to try. She asks for Christophe to give her Taharka's bracelet, and once he gives it to her, she puts each of the 3 bracelets in the specific slots on the door, and once all 3 are inserted, the door to the labyrinth opens, and the trio goes inside. Jack doesn't know what to expect from this place, so he packed a canteen of water, some meat and fruit, chalk, a bag to carry treasure, and 2 small bags, with one being half filled with rocks. Keep this in mind for later. But the lighting inside the labyrinth is thanks to the ceiling, which is made of a translucent rock that shines light down. Jack brought the chalk so he can mark their way so they don't get lost. Amenirdis tries to remember the way, and they first turn left and then another left a few minutes later. Then she realizes it's the wrong way, so Jack marks the wall showing the passage is wrong. They make their way back to the starting point and go right instead, and then they walk down this passage for about 10 minutes or so before they go left, then right, then straight again. Jack is taking this extra seriously, even marking how many steps they are taking on the walls as well, just in case. They turn down a few more passages, and then Jack asks Christophe to stay where he is while Amenirdis comes with him. Christophe is confused at this, but Jack tells him he needs to go pump the bilges. And Christophe gets frustrated and asks why he didn't go before they left. But Jack is doing more than just going to the bathroom here. While Jack is facing the wall, he has Amenirdis stand behind him. Jack then takes out his compass and notices it is spinning like crazy. He tells her it is clear what he wants most, which is getting to the center of the labyrinth. But Amenirdis tells him this is Abademak's temple and that he has great power here. So Jack puts the compass away and the trio presses on. They turn left again and come up to a choice between 3 paths. Jack starts to walk down the middle path, but Amenirdis stops him, saying they have encountered their first illusion. So Amenirdis in the book says, "No, Jack, stop." "Why?" "Because we have encountered our first illusion." Jack peered down the corridor. "Looks perfectly ordinary to me," he said. "Are you sure?" "Yes." She continued staring at it, frowning. "Something is not right. I cannot quite see." "Sacre bleu!" Christophe cried. "Out of my way, Jack! Mademoiselle, you are as faux as he is. There is nothing here." Jack smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Stepping out of the way, he waved, ushering the rogue pirate past him so he could continue down the blank stretch of corridor. "By all means, Christophe, after you." Christophe hesitated, then shrugged and leaned against the corridor. "How do I know you didn't come in here last night and lay a trap for me? This is just the kind of trick you would play, Jax. One of me better tricks coming in here last night with no bracelet, then carefully covering my trail with this nice dust just to fool you, Christophe," Jack commented, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Nobody has been in here for 5 years, Amenirdis said coldly. "Because you stole my father's bracelet, thief." Christophe crossed his arms and looked away. Jack nodded at the corridor. "What do you see, Amenirdis?" "There is an opening in the floor," she said. "It is too far to jump." "Damn," Jack said. "Do you remember this from before?" "No. Either the high priest brought us a different way, or part of his chant included the sacred word, and saying it negated this trap." Dropping to her hands and knees, the princess crawled forward, disturbing the dust. She sneezed, then moved a few inches more, and halted, peering down at what, to Jack, seemed to be a completely solid floor. "The light only illuminates the first 20 or 30 feet, she said. "Then it all becomes gray, then black. I believe the shaft narrows." "Is there a ladder we have to climb down?" Jack asked. "No, Jack. Do you have something I can drop down there, so I can listen for it to hit the bottom?" "I do indeed," Jack said. "I tried to think of everything." Reaching into his duffel, he withdrew the half-full leather bag. Ceremoniously, he reached into it and withdrew a chunk of gray stone. 1 rock, suitable for dropping. Walking over to Christophe, he handed him the stone. "If you would be so kind as to hand it to the lady," he said. "Why don't you go give it to her yourself? Because I would never willingly turn my back on you, especially when I was standing on the edge of a big, deep hole." Christophe drew himself up. "You impugn my honor?" I'd say shooting Don Raphael in the back pretty much established everything I need to know about your honor, or the lack of it. Jack could tell Christophe was thinking of drawing his elegant clichamard and running him through, but after a moment the rogue took the stone and walked over to hand it to Amenirdis. Your rock, mademoiselle. Taking the stone, Amenirdis held it a foot above the floor, then released it. Even though he'd known what to expect, Jack was still amazed to watch it drop through the seemingly solid stone floor, which then proceeded to vanish. The gap Amenirdis had seen from the beginning was revealed. Christophe cursed again and jumped back. Jack edged closer to peer over the drop-off. Long way down, he said. Did you hear the rock land? Solemnly, she shook her head no. Bugger, Jack muttered, looking at the gap. It was close to 10 feet across, and with the wall only 10 feet behind them, it would be impossible to get a running start to try the leap. The rope won't do us any good. There's nothing to attach it to on either side. He looked back down, and it's probably not long enough to reach the bottom. Amenirdis was staring fixedly to Jack's left. Move, Jack, she said, and crawled sideways along the gulf. Dust rose up. They both sneezed. Putting out a hand, she ran it down the wall over the emptiness. When her hand reached the level of the drop-off, her fingers moved outward, at right angles, as though she were running them along a solid surface. This is a ledge, she said. Most interesting. A double illusion. Jack crawled over and verified this for himself. He could clearly feel a solid projection running along what his eyes told him was emptiness. It was wider than his hand with his fingers outstretched, but not by a whole lot. You're right. It's not quite a foot wide. Should be enough, he mused. Though trusting my weight to something I can't see. He shrugged. No way around it, eh? Jack stood up. Christophe, he said, indicating the gap. Will you do the honors? The rogue came over and dropped down to feel the ledge. Very well, he said. Jack, I don't think I can do that, Amenirdis said, staring at the pit. What if I miss a step? I've got an idea about that, Jack said. Don't worry. Christophe took the precaution of removing his coat, hat, boots, and stockings. If you would be so kind as to tie these onto your pack, Jax. Jack nodded. The rogue pirate edged out onto the ledge and moved along it fairly rapidly, feeling his way with his feet. Amenirdis had to look away. Christophe reached the other side and stepped onto the solid corridor. You're next, Jack said, taking the rope off his shoulder. But just do what I tell you. Put your back to the wall and don't look down. Take your boots off. She obeyed, then stood behind the ledge. She was trembling. It will be all right, Jack said soothingly. He tossed the free end of the rope to Christophe, who, without being told, backed up against the wall, preparing to hold the rope taut. See, we're making you sort of a railing, Jack said. The rope will help keep you upright. Just edge along sideways, the way Christophe did. Don't look down. She glared at him. This might seem like child's play for sailors who spend half their time walking around on yardarms and such, but it's not easy for ordinary people. Jack smiled and winked. You're not ordinary. Her mouth tight, Amenirdis edged along the last of the corridor. Jack moved back until he and Christophe were holding the rope taut, about chest high on her. Closing her eyes, she began moving resolutely along the invisible ledge. Sweat trickled down her face as she felt her way along, eyes still closed. As she neared the visibly solid corridor, Christophe said, Only about another foot to go, mademoiselle. You are almost here. Then, moments later, she was on the other side. Amenirdis let out a whoosh of breath, and plunked down in the middle of the corridor, as though her legs had given way. Jack took off his coat, hat, and boots, then tied their clothing in the duffel together with the rope. Christophe took up most of the slack on it, then pulled the bundle across to the other side of the void, as Jack edged along the ledge, then sprang nimbly to safety. The group redonned their clothing and footwear, and Jack passed around the canteen before they proceeded. So after they pass this first illusion, they come to another fork, and Amenirdis tells them to go left, since there is another illusion that is blocking the opening in the wall they cannot see. Christophe goes through the illusion first, and right after he goes through, he screams that there is a monster on the other side. Jack runs through and pulls out his sword, and he sees the monster in question. It is a 20-foot-long cross between a scorpion and a cobra. As Jack and Christophe begin to defend themselves from the creature, Amenirdis begins to read off the names she had written down. Jack goes to the creature's left, turning it towards him, as Christophe then runs around the right side. Jack is able to stab the creature, although it doesn't do much. Once the creature is distracted with Jack, Christophe stabs the lower part of the snake's neck, and Jack is able to slash at the flared hood of the cobra head. Amenirdis keeps reading off the names, and the creature begins to spit venom at both Jack and Christophe. Amenirdis makes it to the end of the list, and the three of them continue to stab at the creature. With the three of them combined, they are able to kill it, and Jack uses the now useless piece of parchment with the names on it to clean his and Christophe's swords. Jack asks how many more of those monsters they will find, and Amenirdis tells him there is one for each element. They faced the earth creature, but there is still air, fire, and water waiting for them. Jack asks her what else the word could be, and she thinks it may be a god or a goddess. She tells him that Apedemoc was worshipped under the name Mahis in ancient Egypt, and Mahi's mother is the cat goddess Sekhmet, and Jack tells her to try those names next time to see if they work. But they continue onward through the labyrinth, making their way through the illusion walls, and after a few more walls, they come into another chamber with another creature. But this one is the air creature, and it is a giant falcon made out of smoke. Right before the falcon can do anything, Amenirdis says the name Sekhmet, and the creature turns around and disappears. Now that they know the sacred word, the rest of the journey should be easier. They start to move faster through the labyrinth, and they eventually come face to face with the fire creature, which is a giant salamander. They say the word Sekhmet, and the creature disappears. They press on, and they run into the last creature, which is the one for water. It is a cross between a crocodile and a hippopotamus, but twice the size of a normal hippo. Jack says the word, and the creature vanishes. They go through one more illusion wall, and then they find themselves at the center of the labyrinth. All the gold and treasure is covered in dust, but they see the statue of Apedemoc holding a pale green gem in his hand, the Heart of Zerzura. But then Amenirdis is surprised when Jack runs up and snatches the heart from the statue. So let's go into the book and see what happens here. "Mine," he caroled, blowing the dust off, then kissing it as he jigged across the floor. "All mine." "Jack?" Amenirdis ran toward him. "Jack, what are you doing?" "Grabbing the best part of the treasure," Jack said. "What else did you expect, lass?" "No, Jack!" Amenirdis cried out in shock, her voice full of outrage and sorrow. "No! I told you! Zerzura needs the heart! Please, Jack, please!" "Sorry, Amenirdis," Jack said. "Someone should have warned you never to trust a pirate." "Jack," she begged, "don't do this. After everything we went through, please!" Sobs choked her voice. Jack shrugged. "Sorry. I made it clear from the beginning I was in this for myself." Pulling the duffel bag off his shoulder, he shoved the heart down into it, then took out the largest of his sacks. "Now, for some more treasure," he said, looking around at the chests full of coins, gold, and silver plates and cups, inlaid weapons, plus coffers spilling over with gemstones and jewelry. Grabbing a handful of jewelry, he let it slide into the sack. He was careful to keep one foot on the canvas duffel every time he bent over to grab another handful to slide into the bag. Amenirdis, having seen the futility of pleading, stood there, weeping quietly. While the altercation between Jack and the princess had been going on, Christophe had quietly been stuffing his own bag, only stopping when it began to bulge. His depredations barely made a dent in any of the piles. "Jax," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the rendition of Spanish ladies that Jack sang while happily filling his bag. "How do we get out of this place? Do we have to find our way back through all these illusion walls again?" "Nope, mate," Jack said, absently buffing a huge ruby on his coat, then holding it up to the light coming from the ceiling. "Amenirdis was kind enough to tell me earlier that the second door, the one opposite the door we just came through, is a shortcut, pretty much a straight route back. You go down a ramp, and it takes you to a passageway under the floor of the labyrinth, then it surfaces just one corridor away from the entrance. There's a door built into the wall that only opens one way. You push it open and turn right, and then there's the entrance, just a few feet on. Are you ready to go? I'm having trouble deciding whether to get more gemstones or more gold coins." He gazed at the treasure piles thoughtfully. "I will be ready in a moment, Jax," Christophe said. "I just need one more item, if you would be so kind. Hand me the heart." Jack heard a choked cry and turned around to find the rogue pirate standing with his hand over Amenirdis' mouth. His pistol was pressed to her temple. Her eyes were wide with terror. Jack's mouth fell open. Christophe's smooth, educated tones grew harsher, more threatening. "I know you, Jax. You've always been soft. You wouldn't even kick that old sot who puked on your boots in the cove. You might be willing to steal from your pretty blackamoor here, but you'd never want her dead. Am I right?" Jax stood up. "She said pistols won't work in here, Christophe." "Do you really want to risk it, Jax? Give me the heart, and I'll let her go." "Christophe, you got plenty of swag," Jack argued. "So have you, mon ami. Now, are you going to bet the pretty blackamoor's life on whether I can pull this trigger, and if it doesn't fire, grab this knife out of my sleeve and slit her throat from ear to ear before you can get all the way across this room? I wouldn't chance it, Jax." Christophe took his hand away from the princess's mouth just long enough for her to gasp, then whimper, "Please, Jack, please." Jack stood there, poised to leap, but the look in Christophe's eyes was enough to make him shake his head and put both hands up. "All right, mate, all right. You can have the bloody thing. Let me get it." He bent over to pick up his duffel, then reached in and felt around for a moment. "Where'd it... Ah, there. Don't hurt her. I have it." Jack pulled his hand out of the bag. His fingers tightly gripped the pale green stone, holding it high so the rogue could identify it. With his other hand, Jack grabbed the small, empty leather bag he'd brought with him. "Here it is, Christophe. See? I'm just going to put it in here, and then I'll throw it to you. Wouldn't want to risk scratching it, right?" Moving slowly, every gesture obvious, he slipped the gemstone into the bag and pulled the ties at the top to secure it inside. "Now I'm going to toss it over there, mate," Jack said. "See?" With a gentle toss of his hand, he threw the bag so it landed almost on top of Christophe's boot. Then Jack straightened up, both hands raised. "Now let her go, Christophe." "Oh, I will, Jax." With a vicious shove, Christophe sent the woman reeling across the floor. Amenirdis tripped over a coffer, fell, and lay there, stunned. The rogue pirate reached down and grabbed the bag, peeked inside, then stuffed it into the top of his sack, one-handed. "And now I take my leave of you, Jax," Christophe said. Aiming the pistol at Jack, he pulled the trigger. The hammer clicked down, but the pistol did not fire. Snarling, Christophe thrust the pistol into his belt. Seeing Amenirdis dazedly trying to sit up, he started toward her, his hand out. "You know, it's been a long time since I had a woman, little blackamoor, and you really are pretty," he said. "You're coming with me." A loud, coughing roar split the air. Christophe stopped short, staring at the doorway they had just come through. An enormous male lion paced through the portal, his yellow eyes fixed on Christophe as he padded forward. Swallowing audibly, the rogue pirate straightened, leaving the princess alone. Then he drew his sword and began backing away. Jack stared wide-eyed at the beast as he shook his tawny mane and roared again, so loudly the piles of treasure rattled. The lion came to a halt between Christophe, who was still backing away, and Amenirdis, who was crouching on hands and knees, trembling. "Amenirdis," Jack said, in a voice that shook, "please tell me that it's another illusion." "No, Jack," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "He is real." Christophe reached his bag of treasure. Grabbing it one-handed, he heaved it up onto his back, then altered his course slightly, now backing toward the exit. Sec. Jack stopped stammering, then glared at Amenirdis. "Say it, damn it!" Christophe reached the exit, stepped through, and then finally turned his back and began to run. Jack heard his footsteps echo as he sprinted down the ramp. He was making good time. "Very well, Jack," Amenirdis replied softly, "but it won't make any difference." Her voice was steady as she said, "Sekhmet." Jack waited for the lion to turn around and head back into the maze, but the king of beasts merely shook his mane again and stood there. "Listen, love," Jack said. "I'm going to come around the perimeter towards you. This way," he pointed. "When I reach you, be ready to jump behind me." "Jack, I don't think that will be—" "Just do it, love!" He began edging sideways, reaching down to draw his cutlass. As his fingers closed over the hilt, dizziness engulfed him. He staggered. Heavy blackness swelled like a wave through his mind. He fought to stay conscious, but it did no good. Jack's last thought as the blackness filled his mind and vision was that he had failed, after all, to protect her. Amenirdis watched as Jack crumpled where he stood. He hit the floor, then lay there, unmoving. She noted with relief that he hadn't smacked his head on the floor, and that his limbs weren't twisted unnaturally. He almost looks like he's asleep, she thought. "He sleeps," said the lion. Amenirdis turned back to see the lion sitting a few feet away, regarding her calmly. She hadn't yet managed to struggle all the way to her feet, so it wasn't too difficult to bring up one knee, spread her arms, then bow her head in the deepest obeisance, the one used by priests and priestesses when they knelt in the chapel of the temple. "My lord Epidemic," she murmured, "I sensed it was you. Please accept my gratitude for saving my life." "Why should I not save the life of my handmaiden, little princess?" the god asked. "This is my place, and here my will is what matters." "Which is as it should be, Lord," Amenirdis said. After a moment she added, "And thank you also for sparing Jack Sparrow's life. He did not know, as I did, who you were when you entered this holy place." "Why should I not spare him?" The god sounded faintly amused. "I chose him, after all, to do my will, to protect my people, to protect the Heart of Zerzura." "So Christophe indeed took the ordinary rock I cast an illusion spell on this morning?" "Yes," said Abademak, "for all the good it will do him. He will not live long enough to enjoy the real treasure he took with him." She glanced over at Jack's duffel. "My lord Abademak," Amenirdis said, hesitantly, "should I go and take the real stone out of Jack's bag? Perhaps conceal it, and thus protect it? Jack sounded so genuine about wanting it for himself when he held it in his hand." "If you do that, my handmaiden," Abademak said, "will you not wonder all your life whether he was a good man, or one who would have betrayed you?" Amenirdis nodded. "I accept your wisdom, Lord," she said. "I will make an offering in the temple tonight to thank you for your gracious generosity toward this man." "Good," the lion god said. "Go with my blessing, handmaiden." As Amenirdis stared at him, the huge lion vanished, to be replaced by the figure of a man with the head of a lion, shining with his golden radiance. The sight was so beautiful, yet so terrible, that she hid her face, and when she finally dared to look again, the god was gone. So we see Christophe was fooled and took the fake heart, which was an illusion Amenirdis had cast earlier in the day. But after Abademak disappears, Jack wakes up and tells them they should make their way out. He grabs his sack of treasure, but before they leave, Jack pulls out the real heart from his bag and puts it back in its place in Abademak's hand on the statue. Finally knowing that Jack is indeed a good man, Amenirdis runs and hugs Jack and kisses him repeatedly. He asks why she is so happy, but she doesn't give him the real reason why. After this, they both make their way to the exit, leaving the labyrinth. We then go on to chapter 17, where Jack, Amenirdis, and Tarek leave the temple. Jack realizes that the expedition into the labyrinth only took 5 hours, and Jack says he wants some rum, and Amenirdis wants a bath. Jack tells her he needs to be back aboard the Wench by 4 bells of the afternoon watch, so they can get ready to set sail. But we see they are planning something here, as Amenirdis mentions having someone sail the royal yacht. They are waiting for Christophe to sail out of the illusion, as the illusion on the heart will dissipate after that. Jack is betting on Christophe to realize the heart is fake, resulting in him ordering his crew to fire on the Wicked Wench once she sails out of the illusion fog. Jack isn't expecting Vipere to fire on the Wench, though, since he has a feeling that if Christophe orders that, his crew might mutiny against him. But we'll get back to this later. After this, Jack and Amenirdis get cleaned up, and they are now out in a small courtyard eating some food. And after they eat, Amenirdis tells Jack she has not 1, but 2 gifts for him. So let's go take a look. "Before we go, Jack, I have something for you. A gift. Actually, 2 gifts. Jack smiled. "A gift? 2 gifts? Not used to receiving those, love. Thank you." But after a second, his smile faded and he looked down. "I don't have anything for you, love. I should, shouldn't I?" "Jack," she said to him, smiling, "today you gave me the best gift anyone ever has. Believe me." "I did?" He looked startled. Don't recall anything of the sort," he said. "I swear by Abademak, I am telling you the truth," she said solemnly. "Now hold out your hand." Jack held his right hand out, a bit nervously. Amenirdis produced a ring. "Let's see what finger this will fit," she said, and tried it. The middle finger proved a perfect fit. "There you go." Jack looked down at it. It was reddish gold, with blue enameled insets and a large red bezel. "Coral," she said, "for my man from the sea." "I love jewelry," Jack said. "It's beautiful." He turned it back and forth in the sunlight, admiring it. Then suddenly his eyes widened in alarm. Darling, this doesn't mean we're married now or anything like that, does it?" Tarek, who was standing behind the princess, huge arms crossed over his massive chest, rolled his eyes. Amenirdis burst out laughing. "No, Jack! I suppose I ought to feel insulted by that remark, but today, nothing you might do or say could upset me." Flustered, Jack stammered. It's not like that, love. I mean, it is, but it's not, if you get my meaning. I'm just not good enough for you, love." Tarek nodded solemn agreement with Jack's statement. "Yes, you are," she insisted. "You're a good man, and don't let anyone tell you you're not." After a moment, he nodded hesitantly. "All right, love. If you say so. I'm not used to thinking of myself like that, to be perfectly candid with you." "Jack, listen. This is not an ordinary ring one wears for adornment," Amenirdis said. "I placed a spell on it. If you should ever want to come back to Zerzura, sail to within a league of the bearings you recorded, then breathe on the ring, all the while thinking of me. Then, just wait. I will come to you through the illusion and escort you through it, as I did before." Jack looked at the ring in wonder. "This means if I sail the triangle, I can swing by, love, especially after I buy my own ship and have to answer to no one." She nodded. "I will look forward to those times, Jack." Then the princess picked up the other article she brought and shook it out. It was a lengthy piece of hand-woven fabric, white, with narrow magenta stripes running through the weave. "I made this for you while we were on the voyage," she said, "on my little hand loom. I think it's probably too long, but you can double it like this." Stepping close to him, she wrapped the fabric around his waist twice, then tied it so the extra hung in short loops. "If you tuck it up like this, it won't show under your waistcoat, Jack." He looked down at the homespun, then rubbed it between his fingers. "Does this have magical properties too, love?" She smiled at him. "I cannot guarantee that it will stop a weapon, Jack, but as I wove it, I chanted, and what I chanted were spells of protection. When you wear it, think of me. I will pray to Abademoc each day that my weaving will be strong enough to protect you from injury or sickness or harm." "Thank you, love," he said, and kissed her, wishing Tarek would take the hint and make himself scarce. Regretfully, he recalled his time limitation. When they drew apart, she cleared her throat. "It's time to go, Jack." Okay, so Amenirdis gave Jack two things. First, a ring that will allow Jack to come back to Zerzura when he wants to, and that's great and all. But the second gift, you may have picked up on it from the description, but this is Jack's sash that he wears in the movies. Apparently, it may have magical properties, as Amenirdis chanted when she wove it. So maybe this is why Jack is always able to get out of any situation. And some of you may be saying, doesn't Jack get this from his crew in the flashback scene in Dead Men Tell No Tales? And yes, you are correct, but I like to consider that scene Salazar's own fanfic, and I just don't like the concept of Jack getting literally every trinket on his person just from one encounter. So believe what you want to believe, I personally consider this acquisition of the sash canon. But after this, Jack is joined by Amenirdis, Tarek, and Chamba as the Wicked Wench sails out of the illusion fog. With the wench is the royal yacht, which is named the Heka, which is following them out so it can take the Zerzurans back through the fog after the wench leaves. The purpose of Amenirdis being on the wench is because she is going to weave a spell that will make Jack's crew forget everything about Zerzura, so the secret island will be protected. Jack asks her to add one detail to the spell, and he tells her to make sure his crew forgets Christophe and La Vipere and how it sailed with them to Zerzura. This is mainly to protect himself when Beckett questions his crew when they return to Calabar. So Amenirdis then goes to Jack's cabin to start weaving the spell. But yes, this means the whole crew, including Robbie, will forget everything about Zerzura and what they experienced there, and pretty much everything about the voyage too. The only ones who won't forget are Jack and Chamba, since Chamba, of course, is staying in Zerzura. But this makes me so sad, mainly for Robbie, because I love his character so much, and the fact that he forgets all this just breaks my heart. But Jack assembles the crew on the deck, and the spell begins to cast, and the crew begins to fall asleep on the deck. We also see Jack just feels terrible for doing this, but he mutters to himself that it's for their own good. But once everyone is asleep, Amenirdis tells Jack they will wake in about an hour with no memory of Zerzura. After this, a rowboat from the Heka makes its way over to the Wench, and now it is time to say goodbye to Tarek, Amenirdis, and Chamba. I'll read this last goodbye between Jack and Chamba here because it really hits home. Jack held out his hand. "Farewell, Chamba. You will certainly be missed aboard this ship. Oh, and by the way, I now declare you an able seaman." Chamba shook his hand. "Thank you, Captain. I sure will miss you and Mr. Robbie, and everyone. Good men, all of them." The sailor had to pause to clear his throat. "Here's the letter you asked me to write, Captain." He held out a folded piece of parchment to Jack. "Thank you, Chamba. I wish you the best." Jack and Tarek lowered the longboat. Chamba picked up the oars and began to row toward the Heka. Once Chamba leaves, Tarek pulls a sack of treasure on board to thank Jack for a job well done. Jack then turns to Amenirdis and says goodbye to her as well. So let's go read this real quick. He reached out both hands and she put hers into them. Jack leaned forward and kissed her cheek. "Fare you well, love," he whispered. "I'll miss you." "And I you, Jack," she whispered in return. "You will be in my prayers every day." And she stepped back. Jack let her slender, dark fingers slide through his. One last touch. And as the Zerzurans sail away, Jack stands at the railing and watches as they make their way back to the Heka. And as the yacht begins to sail back into the fog, he sees Chamba on the deck waving at him. Jack waves back, and then the yacht disappears into the fog. Anyone else feeling emotional? But Jack is then left by himself on deck, as everyone else is asleep from Amenirdis' spell. Jack then puts the letter from Chamba in the sack of gold, and this will explain why Chamba is no longer aboard the ship to the crew once they wake up. Jack goes to his cabin for a bit, and after about an hour, he goes back out on deck. He then lays on the deck too, to make it look like he was also sleeping when everyone starts to wake up. A little while later, Jack is woken up by William Banks, the lee helmsman, who is the first man to wake up. Everyone else wakes up soon after, and some of the crew wonder where Chamba is. They find the letter in the sack of gold and give it to Jack, and he reads it aloud to the crew. In the letter, Chamba tells them that he has decided to go live with Aisha's tribe, going back to the original story Jack had told the crew. He tells them that Aisha put them to sleep and had the gold delivered in thanks for bringing them home. At the end of the note, Chamba tells them not to try sailing into the fog, as it is very dangerous. Jack then has 3 men divvy up the loot to make sure everyone gets an equal share. The crew then cheers and is overjoyed at the extra gold and money they will all be getting. But to make sure the act plays out, and to make sure the crew knows that at least Jack tried to get through the fog to Zerzura, he orders the wench to sail into the fog so he can get the bearings for Beckett. Once they get inside, Jack orders them to turn around, saying it is too dangerous to get through. This completes the act and makes sure that when Beckett questions the crew, they at least verify Jack tried to get into Zerzura. Once they are out of the fog, Jack tells them to heave to and that they will get a fresh start in the morning and sail back to Calabar. But that night, Jack is in his cabin when he hears a muffled sound of what he thinks is someone rowing in a rowboat nearby. He pulls on his baldric and cutlass and makes his way onto the deck to see if anything's out there. And once he leaves his cabin, he sees none other than Christophe on deck. Jack orders Christophe to get off his ship, but he tells him that he had discovered the heart was a fake, and he ordered La Vipere to sail through the fog. His crew refused, and when he told them to wait and fire on the wench when it sailed out of the fog, they refused to do that too. So in protest, Christophe shot his first mate for not following orders, and then he was deposed as captain and thrown into a rowboat, and his crew sailed La Vipere away. This, of course, is exactly what Jack had suspected would happen, and exactly what Jack was planning on happening. Jack tells Christophe that if he doesn't leave the wench, he will kill him. Christophe laughs at this, and he pulls off his coat and hat and unsheaths his sword. Jack readies his sword as well, and it's time for the two of them to settle their differences once and for all. Jack thinks about Christophe's weaknesses before they begin to fight, seeing that he has let himself go over the years, and Jack plans to tire him out first and then go on the attack. Jack notices Robbie and some of the crew are armed with swords and pistols, ready to defend Jack, but Jack orders Robbie and the crew to not interfere unless he is killed or disabled. This is between him and Christophe. So let's go see how it goes down. Neither opponent saluted the other. This was not a match. This was a duel. To the death. Jack attacked. He moved forward, stamping his bare foot on the deck, a movement called an appel designed to startle the opponent, cause his guard to falter. It didn't work. Christophe thrust at him, and Jack parried. Christophe pressed his attack, thrusting, parrying Jack's thrusts, all with lightning speed. It was all Jack could do to parry the rogue's attacks. Jack retreated, parrying, defending himself. For the moment, it was all he could manage to track Christophe's blade in the moonlight, and defend. Jack was being pushed back across the deck. The blades rang against each other, a song of metal. Jack could see and smell sparks as they struck, steel sliding against steel. Jack knew every inch of the wench's deck. He could have found his way around it blindfolded. He let Christophe back him down the narrow strip of deck between the main hatch grating and the amidships ladder, thankful he didn't take a misstep. Christophe managed to catch him once, high on his left arm, when he was just a bit too late in his parry. Though it was barely more than a nick, it stung. "You're bleeding now, Jax," Christophe gasped. Jack knew when he'd passed the opening to the amidships ladder without looking. He'd soon be up against a starboard railing if he continued to retreat. Strategy. A swordsman must think as well as react. If you cannot strategize, you are no better than a wild beast, defending itself with claws or teeth. Are you a beast, Sparrow? A bird, perhaps? No, you are a man. Strategize. The words rang in Jack's mind. They were the words of his first fencing coach, a master Jack had paid with his share of a prize Troubadour had captured off Portugal. Very well. What was his strategy? Long term, it was to wear Christophe down, tire him enough to slow him. Jack wasn't even breathing hard. Yet. As for strategy at this very moment, Jack quickly jumped sideways to his right, turning as he did, so his back was no longer the starboard rail. Now he had room to maneuver, to retreat toward the ladder leading up to the quarterdeck. Aha! As he hoped, Christophe had cut the corner as he advanced. The rogue pirate caught the edge of his left foot on the raised timbers bordering the ladder opening. He faltered for just a moment. Jack aimed a cut and caught him just above his left elbow. Christophe's attempt to parry, then riposte, came too late. Jack had already jumped back out of range. "That one's for Amenirdis," Jack told the Frenchman. "Jax, mon ami, you are such a child." Christophe paid no attention to his own wound. Lust for revenge. Like all, emotion has no place in good fencing. For the first time in the engagement, he lunged, his extension as fluid and flawless as a drawing in a fencing manual. Jack retreated, moving back to basic on guard again, but he made sure that as he did it, he also moved slightly to his left. Strategy. Christophe executed a perfect forward recovery from his lunge, designed to gain him more ground without being obvious about it. Out of the corner of his eye, Jack saw a dark shape, one of his 6-pounders, the one he leaned against the night following the battle with Borja, and behind him and to his right was the capstan, with its protruding spokes. He'd have to be careful not to brush one of them. Christophe lunged again, the blade of Calabar flowing like quicksilver in the moonlight. Jack parried it, even as he retreated, making sure that he again stepped slightly to his left. Jack feinted, then when Christophe fell for it and parried, he lunged for the first time in the fight. He deliberately went wide to the left, and Christophe's attempted parry missed. If Jack's form in the intagliata had been better, he'd have enough extension to run Christophe through the belly, but he only managed to nick him above his belt with the tip of his cutlass. Still, Jack forgave himself when he then managed to be fast enough to negate his opponent's riposte by striking the pommel of the cutlass against the Calabar's blade, deflecting it, even as he leaped back out of harm's way. "That one's for Marie," Jack yelled, seeing blood spreading across the middle of the rogue's shirt, black in the moonlight. His own breath was coming fast now, but he wasn't gasping like a blown horse, and he realized with satisfaction that Christophe was. "Who is Marie?" Christophe gasped, with, Jack realized, genuine puzzlement. The rogue drove himself, thrusting repeatedly, those lightning, deadly moves. Jack was forced back, having to retreat so quickly he barely avoided the spokes of the capstan at the last moment. He zigged left, then continued retreating, still angling left, aiming for the ladder leading to the quarterdeck. If Christophe was out of breath now, imagine how winded he'd be after having to fight his way up the ladder. Christophe pressed his attack, thrusting, lunging, parrying Jack's thrusts and usually following each parry with a riposte. Jack was now breathing hard himself, but he could hear Christophe almost sobbing for air. The next time Christophe lunged, and Jack retreated, as before, back and slightly to his left, Jack had the satisfaction of seeing that his opponent was now lunging with the anticipation that Jack would go left. The angle of his blade had changed to compensate. Good, Jack thought. Strategy. Jack thrust, and Christophe parried. Then the rogue jumped back, panting loudly. He waved his left hand, and blood droplets splattered. "Stop! A moment, Jax. Just need a moment. To rest. Catch my breath." "Ha!" Jack exclaimed. "Think I'll fall for that old trick? I didn't climb my first rat line yesterday, Christophe." Jack knew damned well what would have happened if he heeded the French pirate's plea. The moment Jack relaxed, he had been skewered. Jack tried another lunge, hoping that Christophe's avowed weariness and winded state would slow him, only to have the rogue pirate parry, then riposte with such skill that the point of the Kalichimard barely touched Jack's skin, just above his collarbone. If Jack hadn't had excellent reflexes, it would have gone through his throat. As he leaped back, his heart hammering with the narrowness of his escape, he felt a small, hot trickle sliding down his chest. "I have to finish this soon, or I'll make a serious mistake, and then I'm dead." Jack retreated yet again. He had almost, he knew, reached the starboard ladder leading up to the quarterdeck. "You know, Christophe," he said, "if you surrender now, I'll guarantee you'll not be harmed. I'll give you provisions for your boat." "No," Christophe said, following him, and thrusting, always on the attack, even though his breathing was painful to hear. "If you kill me," Jack stepped back and up the first step of the ladder, "you won't live a bloody minute. Robbie will shoot you, or order you shot. Think, Christophe." "Robbie Green doesn't have the stones to shoot me, Jax," Christophe wheezed, advancing and raising the line of his attack, so as to compensate for Jack's elevated position. "I'll command your wench." "I wouldn't count on that, Christophe," Jack thought grimly. He was bloody well certain that Robbie would immediately shoot Christophe if Jack went down. His first mate hated the rogue captain possibly even more than Jack did, and Robbie, notwithstanding his religious beliefs, was a pragmatist. He'd have no compunction about shooting the Frenchman in the back to save his crew. None at all. Jack leaped up and back, taking 2 steps at once, and as he did so, he slashed down at his opponent, using gravity and elevation to help him. Ordinarily, he wouldn't have risked a slash at an opponent of Christophe's caliber. It was such a blatant move, basically a cut done large and sweeping. Fine for use in battling monsters, but it left a duelist too open to lunge or even to thrust. But Christophe couldn't lunge on the ladder. The most he could do was thrust. Jack's downward slash took off a chunk of flesh and muscle on the bulge of the captain's upper arm. Christophe screamed in agony. For a moment, Jack thought that was the end of the fight, that the Frenchman would fall backward down the ladder and wind up sprawled on the deck, able to be dispatched with a last, quick thrust. But Christophe gathered himself and came on. He even managed an upward thrust at Jack. "That one was for Don Raphael," Jack gasped. He stepped back onto his quarterdeck. He knew he couldn't last much longer. He was gasping too, and his cutlass felt much heavier than usual. Sweat trickled into his eyes, stinging them. Jack swiped at his forehead, blotting sweat as he retreated quickly, trying to give himself enough distance to be able to catch his breath. Christophe came after him, though he staggered a little bit when they reached the top step, catching his toe on it, nearly pitching forward. His left arm now swung limp, as though he had no strength in it. Jack silently cursed his own weariness. If he'd been quicker, he could have taken advantage of that stumble. Jack retreated past the steering wheel and the binnacle on his left, and the fife rail and the little storage cabinet on his right, moving as fast as he could. He didn't want to engage in such close quarters, and he damned well didn't want to risk having his wheel or his binnacle damaged if someone's sword missed. In moments, Jack would be at the port side ladder, and then he'd have to back down, defending himself. Not a good position to be in, even facing a wounded opponent. He felt the descending railing of the ladder beneath his fingers, and began backing down, just as Christophe, having caught his breath, somewhat crossed the quarterdeck in a rush. For a moment Jack considered turning his back and racing down the steps 2 at a time, but he didn't think he could do it fast enough, and if he tried it, it was possible that Christophe might risk it all and dart his sword at him, throw it to hit him in the back as he ran. Instead, he raised his line to defend, concentrating on following the movement of the sword blade so he could parry. The yellow glow from the ship's lanterns hanging up on the quarterdeck, and the reddish glow from the 2 hanging on either side of Jack's cabin, warred with the silver moonlight, making focusing on the blade more difficult. Jack continued to parry, knowing that that was all he could do at the moment. He needed a level field to execute his plan, assuming he could accomplish it successfully. He'd been counting steps, 10, including the top step, so he knew when he was down. Jack retreated, but not too far, because he wanted Christophe to come after him. One more of those beautifully executed lunges. Just one more. Christophe came down the last step of the ladder. To Jack's disappointment, he seemed steadier on his feet, and his breathing was better. Still, he looked exhausted. He lost a lot of blood, and judging by the look on his face, he was in considerable pain. Jack, on the other hand, felt exhilarated, full of energy, as though he had a quick shot of rum and found treasure. He knew the feeling wouldn't last, but for the moment, he felt just fine. Jack raised his blade slightly, focusing on his target. Come on, come on. Christophe hung back a little, seeming loath to engage. Jacques, give up. If you sail back to the Caribbean, Borea will find you, and he'll kill you. I took care of Borea weeks ago, Jack said dismissively. For the first time, he saw fear on his opponent's face. You lie, Christophe said. Jack shook his head, beckoning left-handed. No, it's true. Come on, Christophe. Christophe kept his guard up, but did not advance. Jack decided to start a conversation. In other words, get the blades ringing against each other again. Attacking, he thrust. Had his thrust parried, then when Christophe thrust, Jack parried and riposted. He was careful not to seem too energetic, or to let the crazy grin he felt inside show on his face. Come on, Christophe. It's been a long, hard fight, and your opponent is tired. Maybe you can run him right through this time if you just lunge. Come on, lunge! Lunge, damn you, you devil! Christophe lunged. His line of action turned slightly to his own right, and as he anticipated Jack's retreating, back and slightly to Jack's left, as Jack had been doing since the beginning of the duel. Only this time, Jack didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, grabbing the gold and silver hilt of the Kalishimard hard with his left hand, clamping his grip on it, and forcing it even farther to the left. At the same moment, he thrust hard with his cutlass. The point slid in slightly to the left of Christophe's midsection, just below the sternum, and Jack angled the thrust up by pushing his wrist down on the hilt. Christophe's eyes widened. His mouth dropped open. He gasped, but it was his last breath. Jack retreated one last time, pulling his cutlass free of the body, twisting it as he did so, increasing the odds that it would sever the big vein as it withdrew from the heart. Christophe Julien de Rapier collapsed like a marionette whose strings had been cut. He was dead before he hit the deck. Jack stepped back, light-headed with relief, and carefully laid his sword down on the deck beside him. And that one, Christophe, he said, knowing his enemy couldn't hear him, but needing to say it anyway, was for Esmeralda. Bending over, Jack braced his hands on his aching thighs, and just exulted in breathing and being the man standing, and alive. So Christophe has finally met his end at last. Jack orders his crew to clean up the deck, and Jack and Robbie pick up Christophe's corpse and throw it off the side of the ship into the water. Jack then picks up Christophe's sword, telling Robbie he will give it to Esmeralda as a trophy so she knows her grandfather was avenged. Robbie then stitches up Jack's wound, and he grabs Esmeralda's red bandana from his sea chest to tie around it. Jack then looks down at the sash he got from Amenirdis, wondering if the supposed magic on it protected him during the fight with Christophe. But Chapter 18 begins with the wench sailing back to Calabar, and Jack goes to report to Cutler Beckett. And let's dive in to their heated conversation here. Stop right there, Captain Sparrow. But Mr. Beckett raised a forefinger. I said, stop. Not another word, Sparrow. Let me see if I have the essence of the so-called report of yours straight. He began ticking off items on his fingers as he spoke. Item 1. You were unable to verify the exact location of Kerma. The bearings you have provided are actually the location of a large bank of fog, is that correct? Beckett didn't pause for a response, but forged ahead. Item 2. You had in your possession at least 2 inhabitants of Kerma, but both of them are now gone because someone cast a magical spell on you and your crew, and you fell asleep on the deck of your ship, only to awaken with your passengers gone and a longboat missing. You currently have no idea as to their whereabouts, correct? Jack Sparrow didn't meet his eyes, only shifted his weight uneasily, turning his tricorn in his fingers. Mr. Beckett, I wasn't finished, Captain, Beckett snapped. Sorry, sir, Sparrow said quietly, and fell silent. Item 3. You took on a cargo of Muscovado sugar and molasses in Antigua, and instead of delivering said cargo to its assigned destination in Liverpool, you have brought approximately half that cargo back here to Calabar. Your explanation for losing half your cargo is that it was damaged during an attack by pirates in the Bahamas, correct? By now, Sparrow had learned his lesson. He didn't try to speak, merely nodded. And finally, Beckett continued, Item 4. During that attack, my own vessel, the Wicked Wench, nearly sank, necessitating numerous expensive repairs to said ship in Savannah, repairs that you signed for, that will be charged to the EITC. Beckett eyed Sparrow with all the warmth of a glacier. Is that a correct summary of the salient points of your decidedly rambling account, Captain Sparrow? Sparrow stood there, turning his hat, silent. Answer me, Sparrow! For the first time, Beckett raised his voice. Sparrow jumped. His hat slipped out of his hands and fell. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, you have pretty much summarized it. Yes, Mr. Beckett, sir. He bent over and retrieved the hat, then stood there looking down at it, as though he wished he could clap it on his head and make a hasty departure. And in addition to what I have already spoken of, I also noted, among other things, that you gave an account of your sailing to New Avalon and picking up yet another, allegedly Kerman slave. One that the sewing woman claimed was her brother. Is that correct? And that slave is also gone, correct? Sparrow nodded. Yes, Mr. Beckett. How did you pick up that slave, Sparrow? Did you purchase him with your own money? Sparrow shook his head. No, Mr. Beckett. I didn't have enough. So you stole him. Is that what you're saying? Meaning you are, in point of fact, responsible for 2 thefts of valuable property. The slave from Dalton's farm, and now this slave from New Avalon. Sparrow cleared his throat. I didn't exactly say I stole him, Mr. Beckett. The sewing woman, Aisha, she told me if I wanted her to take me to her island, I'd have to let her bring her friend on board in Calabar. I didn't ask any questions about how you came to be with her, sir. Then, after we left Calabar, Aisha demanded I take her to the New World so she could get her brother. She knew where he'd been taken. I don't know how she knew. And? When we located the brother, he was on a sugar plantation. So, that is Aisha, she left the ship for an afternoon. She must have seen her brother and convinced him to run away. All I did was provide her with a boat and a couple of sailors to row it, sir. You thought I would approve of this second-hand theft. I didn't know whether you would or not, Mr. Beckett, but it was clear to me that the woman wouldn't talk unless she had her brother with her. So after getting the brother, why did you then set off to follow the triangle? Beckett was getting a headache from trying to keep the whole story straight in his mind, not to mention the fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Sparrow took a deep breath. At first I thought it might be better to take our cargo on to Liverpool, Mr. Beckett. But then, after the pirate attack, with much of it being destroyed, I figured the best thing I could do was to head for Kerma. She promised to lead me there. He shrugged. So after the Wicked Wench was repaired in Savannah, I headed back east. The wind worked out better that way, coming down from the north, sir. Tell me more about this pirate attack. Why didn't you simply surrender and turn over your cargo? Why did you resist, and thus cause my ship to be badly damaged? Sparrow shuffled slightly, not looking up. Mr. Beckett, the pirate that attacked us was flying a red flag, sir. Beckett frowned. The more Sparrow talked, the more confusing this all became. A red flag? And what, pray tell, is the significance of that? Naval vessels do that to signify no quarter, don't they? Yes, Mr. Beckett, but there are some pirates over on the Spanish Main that fly a red flag with a horned demon skull. We, that is, the merchant ships, sir, we call them rogues, sir. These ships have a nasty habit of taking a prize, then slaughtering everyone aboard. They do this so they can take the vessel itself, in addition to the cargo, or sometimes they don't bother with the ship, they just burn it with all aboard. When they began firing on us, I knew one thing for sure. Merchant ships that surrender to these rogues never make another voyage, Mr. Beckett. So, believing you and everyone aboard would be killed, you elected to put up a fight. Yes, sir. What happened to this rogue pirate? His powder magazine blew, sir. One of our shots must have hit it. I see. Beckett considered what he had been told. And then, if the Wicked Wench was as badly damaged as you say, how did you manage to get all the way back to Savannah for repairs? Sparrow looked up at him. We were rescued by another ship, sir. You neglected to mention that earlier. Which ship? An EITC ship? Beckett took a sip of tea from a delicate porcelain cup. No, sir. Sparrow bit his lip. Sir, the ship that came to our rescue was the same one I encountered when I was first mate aboard the Fairwind last year. Ship called Venganza. Fortunately, Beckett had swallowed a mouthful of tea. His nostrils flared as he fumed, tapping his fingers on the desk for nearly a minute before he was sure he could speak in a controlled fashion. I see. And you expect me to believe that your friend, this attractive lady pirate, just happened upon your sinking vessel in time to rescue it? Captain Sparrow, the more I hear of this story of yours, the more it sounds like something you dreamed up in a tavern over a bottle. Are you drunk? No, sir, Sparrow said indignantly. Cutler Beckett shook his head and slapped his hand down on the desk, narrowly missing his teacup. He managed to catch the cup before it fell. Tell me the truth! Is that how you actually lost the sugar? Or did you give this pirate the muscovado, and then lie about what happened when you reached Savannah? No, Mr. Beckett. The EITC did an inventory, and they removed the bad barrels, sir. They noted what they'd done on my bill of lading. I have that for you, along with my logbook. So you would have me believe that this lady pirate saved my ship from sinking, helped make temporary repairs, then escorted you to Savannah? Without taking any cargo, just out of the goodness of her heart. Well, sir, she did seem to have a good heart now that you mention it, Sparrow said, nodding at him, especially considering her line of work. Oh, come on now, Sparrow. You expect me to believe a pirate rescued you and your ship for nothing? He narrowed his eyes at Sparrow. She helped you just because she remembered you from last year, and she liked you? The lady must have liked you a rather lot, eh, Sparrow, to make it such an effort on her part worthwhile. What exactly did you do to earn such regard, eh? Beckett watched as Sparrow's cheeks darkened, visible despite the weathering. He's blushing. But that must mean that he and this woman actually... Cutler Beckett's tight control on his temper suddenly snapped like frayed, rotting rope. He surged up out of his chair, hands curling into fists. Damn it, Sparrow! He shouted. Lady pirates and ghost-haunted fog banks and the whole ship falling asleep. It's like something out of a bloody fairy tale. Why didn't you sleep for 100 years while you were at it? Beckett's eyes narrowed as he locked gazes with the merchant captain. Captain Sparrow, do you believe that I am gullible? Or stupid, even? Sparrow shook his head, his dark eyes widening. Oh, no, Mr. Beckett. No, sir. No. Beckett studied the man who stood before him. Sparrow's dark eyes were steady and frank, his stance one of respect, with a healthy touch of real fear mixed in. He appeared both humble and anxious, which was just as it should be. And yet, Jack, Beckett said, with an edge in his voice that could have sliced paper, you're lying to me. I don't know how precisely what you're lying about, but I assure you, I will find out, and when I do... He shook his head, gravely, and looked back down at the papers on his desk. You might want to think about that, Captain. Sparrow clearly was at a loss regarding how to reply to this last, so he remained still and silent. Beckett made an irritable shooing away motion. You are dismissed, Captain Sparrow. Sparrow placed both hands together and gave the abbreviated oriental bow Beckett had seen him use before, murmured, Yes, Mr. Beckett, and left. Cutler Beckett sat there at his desk for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. He was furious, frustrated, and bitterly disappointed at seeing his dreams of Zerzuran riches crumbling before his eyes. And that wasn't the worst part of it. The EITC director shook his head with a sigh. He hated to admit it, and was extremely annoyed with himself for having such a human failing, but there was no denying the truth. He, Cutler Beckett, felt personally betrayed. So yeah, we're getting to the point now where everything is starting to build up to the main event here in just another chapter. But after this heated exchange between Jack and Beckett, we see that Mercer was in the other room the whole time, and Beckett tells him to come in once Jack leaves. The two of them begin to interview the whole crew of the Wicked Wench to see if there are any differing reports about the voyage. In the interview with Lucius Featherstone, Lucius mentions the fight between Jack and Christophe, saying that he believed Christophe to be a revenant or a ghost. But after reviewing the crew, Beckett has Jack come into his office again, and Beckett begins to ask him some of the smaller details about if Aisha learned English to communicate with him, and what happened to the earrings from Duke Renjon, and the fight with the ghost, aka Christophe. He asks why Jack didn't bring up this fight, and Jack tells him he was ashamed to tell him because it was, in fact, a ghost. He tells Beckett it was the ghost of his old fencing master from Marseille, and he gives Beckett a false account of what happened. But Beckett knows this is a complete lie, although he didn't say anything about it to Jack. I just want to read Beckett's thoughts after hearing this story, because this is going to lead into what comes next. Let me read it. "But you're lying to me, Jack. You know it. I know it. And I suspect you know that I know it. But that my hands are tied, because I can't prove it. So all of that earlier fidgeting and hat twisting you did was just a performance, Jack, to prove how nervous you felt and how sincere you were. Bravo, you smug, arrogant blighter. You forget whom you're dealing with, Jack. I'm the director for West African Affairs for the East India Trading Company. You think I have to swallow this folderol you've handed me, and that we'll just go on from there? Think again, Jack. You're due for a good humbling, you swaggering young cockerel, and I know just how to hand you one, starting now. As a matter of fact, I can think of several ways." Beckett then lies himself, saying that he is sorry for misjudging Jack, and he hopes Jack will accept his apology. He tells Jack to have a seat, telling him that Lord Penwallow has asked for Jack personally to deliver a certain cargo. We're getting to the thick of it now. Let's go back into the book. "Captain Sparrow, I know your thoughts on this matter, but I fear I have no choice but to insist. This letter is from Lord Penwallow, and as you will hear, he has asked for you specifically." Beckett began reading aloud. "Accordingly, will you please begin gathering a cargo of approximately 200 prime blacks for shipment to my new plantation on New Avalon. At least 150 will need to be prime, strong bucks, and the rest may be wenches, preferably those of gentle nature, and trainable in the arts of keeping a civilized household. Montgomery will need the cargo before the spring planting is to begin. If your Captain Sparrow is available to take them, that would also be most pleasing to me. The young mariner is so careful with cargo, I feel sure that under his oversight we will lose no more than one hopes, a quarter of the cargo during the crossing." Sparrow was already shaking his head. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Beckett, but I can't do that. Lord Penwallow said if your Captain Sparrow is available to take them. I'm not available, and that's your out. Find another captain." "I'm afraid there isn't anyone else, Captain Sparrow," Beckett said, putting the letter down. "All of my ships are out of port. As soon as I received the bearings you provided for the proximate location of Kerma, I gave orders for my expedition to assemble, then sail northward. Surely you noticed when you tied up that the Wicked Wench is the only ship currently occupying the EITC dock." Sparrow shook his head yet again. "Well, another ship is bound to show up within a few days, Mr. Beckett. Besides, the Wench isn't fitted to haul that type of cargo." Cutler Beckett shook his head in turn. "I am sorry, Captain. I checked my scheduling, and we're not expecting any other ships to return for at least 3 weeks. And probably more. As the saying goes, My hands are tied. Mr. Mercer just completed the purchase of his lordship's order. We must ship that cargo out. The longer they stay in Calabar, overcrowded in the holding pens, the greater the chance of some pestilence wiping out the whole lot of them. Sparrow was staring at him, evidently realizing that Beckett wasn't going to back down this time. The captain wet his lips. No, Mr. Beckett, I won't do it. I'm sorry to have to do this, but I formally resign my position as an EITC captain. Captain Sparrow, there is something you need to consider before you do that, Beckett said. I've been sheltering you from an unpleasant truth, I fear, because of your exemplary work for me in the past. When an EITC captain loses more than one cargo within the span of a year, for any reason, even pirate attacks, the company has the option of charging him for the cost of the lost second cargo. It's a clause we included to protect us against incompetent mariners. Check your contract. But, Beckett raised a hand, cutting him off. Captain Sparrow, I'm willing to make it worth your while to carry Lord Penwallow's order. But if you refuse, even if you resign, you will still owe us for the Muscovado sugar you lost. And that sum comes to... He checked an account book, then did a quick mental calculation. Then he named a sum. Admittedly, he patted it a bit, just for the enjoyment of seeing Sparrow's eyes widen and hear him gasp softly. Mr. Beckett, I don't have that much, Sparrow said. It would take me years to earn that much. I'm sorry, Captain. If you resign, you will owe us this sum. If you refuse to take a rightfully assigned cargo, you'll owe it too. But, Beckett tried to sound reassuring, if you make this one trip for me, Captain Sparrow, and thus make it possible for me to honor Lord Penwallow's request, then I will promise you on my word as a gentleman that I won't ever ask you to do it again. If I had another captain to take this cargo, I would hire him, but as you can see for yourself, I don't. Beckett spread his hands and shrugged slightly. Sparrow sat there. His face was under control, but he couldn't hide the look in his eyes. If Beckett hadn't been so focused on humbling, nay, taming the EITC's West African free spirit, as he'd come to think of Jack, he might have felt sorry for him. My Sparrow has just discovered the limits of his cage, I fear, Beckett thought. Beckett leaned back in his seat, watching Sparrow's internal struggle for a few minutes. Time for the coup de grace. I can see this is difficult for you, Jack, he said. I am sorry to have to demand this of you. I'm realizing that this voyage may be a genuine ordeal for you, and I'd like to show you that I appreciate your sacrifice for the company. So I'll make you a proposition. I know you'd like to have a ship of your own. If you will command the Wicked Wench to deliver Lord Penwallow's cargo, I'll sign her over to you. You will own her, Jack. Sparrow's eyes widened, and his mouth fell open. You'd do that, Mr. Beckett? I would, Beckett said. I will. All you have to do is take her on this one voyage, and then come back here. Look. He opened another drawer in his desk and withdrew a file. Here is the title to her. The day you return from the successful completion of this voyage, I will sign this over to you, for the sum of, let's say, a shilling, just to keep everything perfectly legal. Jack Sparrow was looking dazed. You want her, right? Yes, I do. Beckett heard the fierceness underlying his voice. I can't make you a better offer than this one, Jack. You'd be mad not to take it. I would be, Sparrow said. Excuse me for a moment. He stood up, then strode over to the corner, and stood staring at the blank wall, fists clenched. Cutler Beckett watched him, wondering what he'd decide. He rather thought he knew, but Jack had surprised him before, he recalled. Eventually, Sparrow turned back around and walked back to the deck. All right, Mr. Beckett, he said, his voice low and rough with repressed emotion. You have yourself a deal. I'll deliver Lord Penwallow's cargo. Just this one time. Never again. Savvy? Perfectly, Jack, Beckett said. He held out his hand. Shall we shake on it, then? Sparrow stared at the proffered hand as though it were a snake. Finally, he shook his head. My apologies, Mr. Beckett, he said quietly, but I would not feel right doing that. I'm sorry. That's all right, Beckett said, his tone kindly, understanding. What did he care about a handshake? He'd won. Sparrow was humbled. There was no mistaking that look in his eyes. He was trapped, as surely as a wild creature with its neck in a snare. I understand this will be difficult for you, Jack. I want to do everything I can to make it easier on you. I'll provide you with experienced men to handle the cargo. You won't have to do anything except sail the Wench." "Yes, sir," Sparrow said. "We'll be spending the next few days doing some refitting of the ship, Jack. Nothing that can't be undone, don't worry. So find yourself something else to do, and give your crew shore leave." "All right, Mr. Beckett." All right, so Jack has just been tasked with delivering the cargo of slaves to Penwallow's plantation. And if you can't hear it from the sound of my voice, I am getting very excited because we are finally getting to the event that changes Jack's life forever. So let's continue. Jack spends the next few days drinking rum, pretty much getting drunk every day. This was not a decision he made lightly, but Beckett backed him into a corner, and he also promised to turn the Wench over to Jack if he successfully delivers the slaves. But this is not making it any easier on Jack's conscience, and we see that it is not only Jack and Robbie who feel terrible about doing this. Some of the Wench's crew quit, including Frank Connery and Roger Prescott, along with a few others. Some of them quit because they were against trading slaves, and others quit because slave trading is just dangerous. Beckett also assigns 6 slave handlers to the crew of the Wench to supervise the slaves. And once the slaves are loaded into the hold of the Wicked Wench, Jack begins to sail out of Calabar, heading for New Avalon. So Jack tries to go down to the hold to at least see the slaves once. But once he gets close enough, before he even gets into the hold, he hears the slaves crying, groaning in pain, moaning and whimpering. Jack is scared to death of going into the hold, so he runs up to the main deck and stands in the rain for 20 minutes trying to wash himself of the guilt he is carrying. But one day, Jack decides to take the helm for a bit, but he immediately feels the difference in the Wench. So let me read this quick excerpt. "But when Matthews ceded him the wheel, and Jack stepped into place at the helm, the ship felt different. The Wicked Wench had always been yar, quick and responsive to her helm, a pleasure to steer. But when he took the wheel this time, her yar was gone. She felt sluggish. Her response to the wheel almost labored, as though the ship was oppressed. Frowning, he experimented, turning the wheel to port, then starboard, watching the compass. Jack had always fancied that his wench responded to his touch joyfully, like a human wench with her lover, by turns coy and flirtatious, bold at times shy, needing to be tenderly coaxed. This ship felt like a thing, merely a wooden construct with canvas sails, and nothing more. Lifeless. On the 6th day of the voyage, Robbie comes up to Jack asking how he's doing. Jack curses Beckett out, saying, "May all the forces of Hades and Hell damn Cutler Beckett for eternity, Robbie. May he die alone and have no one to mourn him." Jack knows that even if he completes this voyage, the wench will forever be tainted. And this is where Jack tells Robbie he cannot take the slaves to New Avalon. Jack tapped his fingers on the tabletop for a minute, then got up, and restlessly paced back and forth for many minutes. Finally, he halted. "I'm going to bloody let them go, Robbie." "Let them go? Where? They'll just be recaptured." "Not where I'm going to release them, they won't. I'm sailing for Kerma, Robbie. It isn't far off our course. I'll get Amenirdis, that's Aisha's real name, to talk to her brother into giving the slaves, what do they call it?" He snapped his fingers. "Asylum, yes." Robbie's mouth dropped open. "But Jack, we can't get back there. We tried the fog bank. It was awful. The ship will be lost." "Don't worry about that," Jack said. "Amenirdis gave me this." He held up the ring. "With this I can summon her, get her to come out and take these people to safety." "And then what?" "Then I'm stealing my wench and taking her back to the Caribbean. Port Royal. I hope I can get a message to Esmeralda there. I'm going to take her up on her offer." But, what about Teague? You said he'd be hung if you tried to go back." That was when Borya and Christophe were still alive. Now they're dead and at my hand. Well, I had help with Borya, but who's going to know? Esmeralda said if I proved that I had made up for what I'd done, by killing the rogues I'd stupidly freed, that would be my way back to the cove, and acceptance and forgiveness by the pirate lords. Remember? Jack nodded at Christophe's sword, hanging on the wall. Both rogues are dead. If I steal the wench, I'll be a pirate anyway. Might as well go for the whole thing, Robbie. But, Robbie, when I get to Port Royal, I'll release anyone in the crew that doesn't want to go with me. I'll pick up enough of a crew to get the wench to Tortuga, and then I'll be able to get a full crew. It will work. I know it will. I'm with you, Robbie said. We can take some fine prizes with this ship if we get her properly armed. I was hoping you'd say that, Robbie. Jack whirled. Let's get more canvas on this leaky old sow of a tub. I want me wench back, and I'll get her by reaching Kerma as quickly as possible. Robbie, it will take a couple of weeks to get there. Talk to the crew. Feel them out. Find out who's a possible candidate to help us. When we reach that fog bank, we'll need armed men to keep Beckett's people in line as we offload the slaves. Can you do that? Robbie stood up. I'm your man, Jack, he said. Now and always. You know that. It's good to hear you sounding like yourself again. It's good to feel like meself again, Robbie. Hold on a moment. This calls for a toast. Jack quickly poured shots of rum into a couple of battered cups for himself and his first mate. Here's to going back on the account, Robbie. I say to hell with the Cutler Becketts of this world, and to hell with their so-called legal ways of doing business. Once a pirate, always a pirate. I know that now, and I swear from now on it's the pirate's life for me. To the pirate life, Robbie echoed. They clashed their tin cups together and drank the toast. I cannot keep the excitement down. I'm sorry, guys. I love Pirates of the Caribbean, okay? You all obviously know that, but I love Pirates of the Caribbean. But let's press forward. Anyway, a few weeks later, the Wicked Wench reaches the illusion fog, and Jack uses the ring's power to hopefully summon Amenirdis. Jack assembles his most loyal men, which include Robbie, Matthews, Banks, Trafford, Etienne de Ver, and Lucius Featherstone, to help him free the slaves once he knows Amenirdis has sensed his arrival. And then, a little while later, the Heka emerges from the fog, and Amenirdis, Chamba, and Tarek are on board. Jack boards the yacht and sails back through the fog after explaining what he intends to do to Amenirdis. And while they're sailing through, Amenirdis tells Jack that she and Chamba have been helping Zerzurans learn English, and she also tells him about all the progress they have made so far since he left. He tells Amenirdis that Beckett was sending a fleet toward the bearings Jack had written down, and that she will need to change the way the island is hidden, just in case. He tells her to make it so the island simply is not visible, and that if anyone gets close, their compass will stop working. He also tells her in case anyone gets too close, to make it so their eyes glide past the island, making them not able to see it at all. Amenirdis agrees to all this, and Jack is then taken to see Pharaoh Shabako, and he asks for the slaves to be granted asylum in Zerzura. Shabako agrees to take them in, but he tells Jack he cannot make such a gesture again, since the island is not that large. But Jack is relieved and thanks him. After this, all kinds of Kerman vessels along with the Heka sail out to the Wench and help all the slaves off the ship. Jack is feeling way better now, but he knows now there's no going back. His life as an honest merchant sailor is over. But with a few minutes left, Amenirdis comes aboard the Wench, and the two of them hold each other in Jack's cabin. They relish their memories and time spent together, and Jack tells her he is going to become a pirate again. Amenirdis tells him to come visit her whenever he is in this part of the world, and Jack promises to do so. After this, she boards the Heka once more, and the rest of the Kerman vessels disappear back into the fog. Jack then tells the slave handlers that they are not going back to Calabar, and he has them work on the deck, outlining that they are not to cross him or his crew. Jack then takes the wheel again, and this time he feels the wench back to her normal self. Her yard is back, and Jack is relieved. But the next morning, Robbie alerts Jack there are ships approaching. 5 of them to be specific. And they are all flying the East India Trading Company flag. There was no escape for the wench now, and Jack is taken into custody and brought aboard one of the ships, which is named the Sentinel, and they begin to sail back to Calabar. And now we come to chapter 19, which is the moment we have all been waiting for. But before we get there, we have a little bit more to get through. Jack is taken back to Calabar and imprisoned in the jail there. While he is in there, he continues to stay active, walking 5 miles each day in his cell and also doing chin-ups on the cell door. He also begins to mark off how many days have passed with a small stone that he found on the floor, and 35 days after he was imprisoned, Robbie is then put into the cell next to Jack. Robbie tells Jack that he was able to see the illusion was indeed changed, and that the EITC were not able to find Zerzura. This puts Jack at ease, but he tells Robbie to keep in shape just in case they are able to make a break for it. Robbie tells Jack he buried his share of the treasure here in Calabar, and he will tell Jack where it is in case he doesn't make it out. But Jack reinforces they will both make it out. It is now day 53 for Jack, and Robbie and Jack are discussing what they should do if they are able to escape. "Have you thought about what we should do if we get out of here, Jack?" Robbie asked, one day, just after Jack had scratched off day 53 on the wall of his cell. Jack shrugged. He dropped his voice, even though Joe the jailer was at least 20 feet away and appeared to be sound asleep, rocked back in his chair. The snores were convincing at any rate. "Presuming we can dig up your largesse, mate, we should probably split up, make us harder to find." "But Africa, Jack," Robbie said, "where can we go?" "Hard question, mate," Jack cogitated. "We might try working our way up the western coast, possibly catching a ship out of the nearest port of North Calabar. I need to look at a map." He thought for a moment. "Assuming we do make good on our escape, where would you like to go, more than anywhere else?" Robbie's blue eyes grew dreamy. He rubbed at his beard thoughtfully. I guess I'd want to be back on a farm," he said. "There's enough money for me to buy a little farmstead of my own. I get some geese and ducks, maybe some turkeys, chickens, of course, a couple of pigs, I love bacon and ham, and a mule for plowing and some milk cows." Robbie smiled as he built his vision. "I'd grow apples and peaches. I wouldn't eat anything but fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, and fresh bread, grown from my own wheat, Jack. No more biscuit you have to soak before you can get it down, lest it break your teeth. And who would bake that bread, mate? I'd find a wife, a nice girl, country-born, country-bred. She'd have cheeks as pink as the blush on a ripe peach, and all her teeth. She'd be the kind of girl that didn't nag or complain, but was a cheerful sort, with a nice shape." Robbie's hands described curves in the air before him. "Not skinny and not fat either. Just a little plump, maybe, in the right places." "Stop it, mate, you're torturing me," Jack moaned, covering his eyes with his hands. "I've been cursing myself for 1,000 kinds of a fool the last time I saw Amenirdis we didn't." He broke off and cleared his throat. "Never you mind." Robbie laughed. "Sorry, Jack. I'll talk about religion. That's sure to cool your blood. I'll be a deacon, maybe. My wife would sing in the choir. We take the little ones to services every Sabbath." Robbie stretched, then sighed. "If only we could get out of these wretched cells." Jack sat down beside him on the other side of the bars, cross-legged. "You know, Robbie, you might think about taking orders. You'd make a very good vicar." Robbie turned to him, his eyes widening. "Me? A vicar? Ministering to the souls of a flock? Oh no, Jack. You'd have to have an education for that. Go to a seminary or something. The idea appeals to me, but I couldn't do that. I'm not fit." "I've never met anyone more fit, Robbie," Jack said. "Look at what a good influence you've had over me these past 5 years." "Good influence?" Robbie shook his head. "Jack, you still drink like a fish, gamble, and I long ago lost track of the wenches, or in the case of Esmeralda and Aisha, ladies. Ah, but think of how wicked I would have been if I hadn't had you to slow me down, mate." Robbie threw up his hands. "You really should think about it, mate," Jack urged. "You can get a county. You can get a country. What did they call them? Parish. You could still have the cow and the chickens, and he waved a hand, all that. Who knows? You might be giving your sermon one Sabbath, and look out over your congregation, and there I'd be, sitting in the front pew listening intently. Jack grinned impishly. And when the service is over, you can bring me home with you, and Mrs. Green can serve me a splendid Sunday dinner. I'll get to meet your offspring, your stalwart sons, and your lovely daughter. Jack, I would wall the poor girl up in the cellar before I let you within 50 feet of a daughter of mine. Or my wife, either, Robbie stated with an edge in his voice. Jack realized that if they weren't sitting in their cells, and they were still pirates, Robbie would have placed a hand on the hilt of his sword. He raised both hands in a placating gesture. Hold hard, come about, Robbie, old lad. I was joking. Slowly, Robbie relaxed. Jack sat back. I can't believe it, he said. 5 years of living in each other's pockets, and all the scrapes I've gotten us into, and you, Robbie Green, finally lose your temper over trying to protect the virtue of a daughter you don't even have. Robbie stared at him in complete bewilderment. I don't know what came over me, Jack. The friends regarded each other for a long moment. Then, simultaneously, they both began to laugh. Robbie whooped until his ribs obviously protested, and he fell limply over onto his back. He lay there gasping and laughing, his legs waving feebly like an overturned beetle's. Jack laughed too, so hard that he had to wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. He didn't dare look at Robbie, or he knew he'd go off again. Instead, he sat there, wiping his eyes, still sputtering occasionally. It was at that moment that Cutler Beckett's men came for them. All right, great moment there between Jack and Robbie, but Beckett's men come to get both of them, and now here we are, after 560 pages, at the moment. The moment. Let's do this. Both Jack and Robbie are brought aboard the Sentinel as it sails up the Calabar River toward the Atlantic Ocean. Mercer comes and brings them both onto the main deck, where Cutler Beckett is waiting. And he is standing next to a small brazier with a long metal rod sticking out. And to make it even better, the Wicked Wench is anchored about 300 or so feet away. This is it, everyone. Let's see what happens here. Jack's heart began to pound, and he was suddenly as frightened as he had ever been in his life. Cutler Beckett nodded to Mercer. Dismiss your men for a moment, please, Mr. Mercer. Mercer nodded, and the 6 Marines moved away, heading up toward the bow, out of earshot, though they could still see the captives. Beckett strode toward Jack. Gone was any attempt at false friendliness or subterfuge. His gray eyes were bright with fury, and he was holding a sheet of parchment in his hand. When he reached Jack and spoke, his voice was low and intense. He radiated anger. Jack, this letter arrived yesterday from Lord Penwallow, my former patron. In it, he chastises me for not delivering his cargo. Jack shook his head. People aren't cargo, mate. Casually, Beckett slapped him across the face, then went on as though there had been no interruption. He also writes to me of an incident related to him by his overseer at his estate in New Avalon. It seems that someone impersonated his son, Baron Frederick Penwallow. Lord Penwallow doesn't have the faintest idea who that person was, but you and I do, don't we, Jack? The little man was quivering. He was so angry. Everything I've worked for, here in Calabar, enduring this hellish climate, getting this coast operating smoothly, everything, all that work, wasted, gone. My chance at a title, my possible advancement, the regard of my superior in the EITC hierarchy, gone. All of it gone because of you, Jack Sparrow. Beckett paused as if waiting for Jack to say something. Jack didn't think there was anything he could say, and his last remark had gotten him slapped, so he remained quiet. Oh, and by the way, Beckett crooked a finger at Mercer, your cabin was searched, Jack, once you were no longer occupying it. Would you like to guess what we found? Jack's heart sank as Mercer carried a sack over and began emptying it in front of him. There it was, all the Zerzuran treasure, everything he'd Jack blinked. Actually, it wasn't all there. They'd evidently missed one of the hiding places, the one located in the bulkhead of his cabin. It wasn't a big hidey hole, so he used it to secrete mostly coins and gems. Beckett was silent, then suddenly, Jack felt his hand seized. "I should have noticed this before," the ITC director said. Ruthlessly, he yanked at Amenirdis' ring, pulling it off, despite Jack's effort to curl his finger over it. Briefly, he examined it. Zerzuran work, of course. You got this when you went there, didn't you, Jack? You lying, scheming scoundrel. You pirate! He cracked Jack across the face again, this time with the back of his hand. It wasn't a very hard blow, as such things went, but it rocked him, and it stung. Jack shook his head, trying to focus. "My captains," Beckett said, still examining the ring, turning it in his fingers, "have informed me they have been sailing fruitlessly in circles for days now. Kerma is there. It must be there, but they can't find it. But you found it. Damn you, Sparrow!" He spat in Jack's face. Jack felt the thick, hot spittle hit him, perilously close to his eye, and was grateful it wasn't another blow. Beckett held the ring up. "Who gave this to you? That ugly old crone, that seamstress? I'll bet you charmed her, Jack. I'll bet you did anything it took to get her to take you to Zerzura. You probably seduced her, seduced that hideous black thing. Jack, because you have no integrity, no decency, no honor, you disgust me." With a casual flip of his wrist, Beckett tossed the ring over the side of the ship. Jack closed his eyes, grieving, bereft. Now he'd never find Kerma, or Amenirdis again, his lovely, courageous princess. He'd never again kiss her sweet mouth, or hold her in his arms. He'd never again hear her laugh. He took a deep breath, and it hurt. After a moment, Jack opened his eyes to find Beckett just standing there, staring at him, as if somehow realizing that something significant had occurred, but of course he didn't understand what he'd done. Beckett motioned to the Marines, and they returned to the captives. Then he nodded to Mercer. "Mr. Mercer, it's time. First we warn the world of what Captain Sparrow truly is. Then we punish him." Mercer nodded at the Marines, and two of them stepped over to grasp Robbie's arms. "Cut their bonds," the Scotsman instructed, "just in case they decide to go over the side to save us the trouble of hauling them back to England in prison." Quickly, Jack and Robbie's hands were freed. 2 Marines held Robbie, and the other 4 clustered around Jack. 3 held him, while the 4th used his knife to cut Jack's shirt, then with a sudden yank, ripped it off him. Mercer went over to the brazier. Picking up a rag, he grasped the end of the rod, lifting it from the glowing coals. Jack saw the end of the brand was the letter P. Oh no, no, Jack thought. He could smell his own fear, rank in his nostrils, and for a moment he was afraid he would disgrace himself, plead or weep or wet himself. But somewhere he found the strength to stand there, silent, although he couldn't stop trembling. "Now everyone will know what you really are, Jack," Beckett said. "I'm doing the world a service." Mercer walked toward Jack, and Jack could tell the operative was enjoying every moment. As the Scotsman walked past Beckett, the ITC director suddenly reached out and grabbed his black sleeve. "Let me," he said, his voice low and thick. He sounded avid, greedy, excited. "I want to do it myself." Grasping the brand, Cutler Beckett approached. The P was glowing as yellow as the sun. The Marines held Jack's right arm, keeping it as still as if he were bound in iron chains. Cutler Beckett touched the iron to Jack's forearm. Jack smelled burned hair, then burned flesh. He heard the sizzle. The iron pressed harder, harder, sinking into Jack's flesh, hissing like the cobra monster from the labyrinth. The pain was so intense that for the first few moments, Jack couldn't catch his breath enough to make even a faint sound. Agony erupted in his flesh, running up his arm, engulfing it. Jack's knees sagged, and only the grasp of the Marines kept him on his feet. He sucked in air. and screamed. Jack didn't even notice when Beckett finally pulled the brand away. He was somewhere else, lost in a world of pain, and his only conscious thought was a wish that he'd pass out, but he didn't. Mercer approached and dumped a bucket of seawater over Jack's arm. He studied the results, then nodded at Cutler Beckett. "A good, clean job, Mr. Beckett. Nice and deep." Finally, the Marines let Jack go. He slumped to the deck, then sat there, cradling his arm as the all-engulfing pain finally ebbed. His arm still hurt, and the sight of the blackened P nearly made Jack sick to his stomach, but the pain receded to a manageable level. He was able to look up to see what had happened to Robbie. His friend hung in the arms of the Marines, looking nearly as limp as Jack felt. "And now, Jack," Cutler Beckett said, "it's time for your punishment." He smiled as if he were quite enjoying himself. "I confess that I'm going to miss the old Hulk, but really, she's not worth all that much. It's not like she's a new ship. It's worth losing her to see you suffer, Jack." He nodded at Mercer. "Order them to fire. Use the carcass charges." Mercer nodded, then disappeared down the ladder leading to the gun deck. Jack scrambled to his feet. "What?" he blurted. "What's going on?" "Oh, so you finally speak," Beckett said. "I was beginning to think the cat had gotten your tongue, Jack." Jack looked over at the Wicked Wench. "She's just a ship," he said, wonderingly, "made of wood and canvas. You're going to destroy your own property? Just to get back at me." "She's not just a ship to you, Jack," Beckett said. "And yes, that's precisely what I'm going to do." Jack stared at Beckett. "You're like a child," he said, letting the contempt he felt show. "An overgrown, angry child. Just because you can't have what you want, you do this. It's twisted. Mad." Beckett looked at Jack. "And what is it that I want, Jack?" he asked, sounding genuinely puzzled, as though he really didn't know. Jack looked at him. "Fear, love, respect. None of which you will get from me," he replied. Beckett's face darkened. His hands tightened into fists. "You." 3 cannons roared at nearly the same time. Jack saw the projectiles heading for the Wicked Wench, lying innocently, peacefully at anchor. He knew what carcassed ammunition was. It was a thin casing surrounding flammable material, designed to start a fire. Mercer ran up the ladder just as 2 of the projectiles struck their target. The 3rd overshot it. The Scotsman laughed. "She's got bales of dried straw soaked in oil on her weather deck and main deck," he said. "She'll go up like paper." "No," Jack whispered. The explosions echoed inside him, hurting worse than the brand. "I have to get to her!" He lunged toward Sentinel's gunwale. Hands grabbed him, but he was a wild thing, fighting as if he had never fought in his life, filled with berserker rage, punching, kicking, even biting to get free. 2 of the guards were down. Jack slammed his fist into the 3rd guard's jaw, and then he was free, bolting for the railing. Someone moved to cut him off. Cutler Beckett himself, yelling, his face distorted with rage. He picked up a cutlass and was waving it. Jack didn't even slow down. Knocking the weapon out of his hand, he grabbed the little man by the collar and pitched him headlong over the railing. While Beckett was still in midair, Jack leaped to the top of the rail, then dived off, arcing out, heading for the Wicked Wench. The touch of the cold water felt good, though the salt awakened the brand. Jack surfaced with a powerful kick, ignoring the fire in his arm. Behind him, he could hear Mercer yelling orders. Maybe Beckett will drown before they can fish him out. He began swimming, then a hand grabbed his left shoulder. Jack turned, fist raised, to find Robbie beside him. "Come on, Jack," his friend panted. "It can't be more than a mile to shore. We can make it. I'll help you if you need it. When we get there, we'll get the Zerzuran gold, and then we'll be free." Jack shook his head. "You go," he said. "I'm going after the wench." "But Jack, she's on fire!" Jack turned to find it was true. Flames spouted up from the weather deck, amidships. "They used straw," he said. "I can push it overboard. I have to try." "No, Jack, don't! You'll die for nothing!" Jack kicked off his shoes. They were weighing him down. "Then I'll die," he said. "I still have gold aboard. If all else fails, I'll get that." "Jack, please!" Robbie looked frantic. "Please, come with me." "No!" Jack shouted. "Swim, damn you! Get your gold. Buy your farm. Earn that vicar's collar. Marry that pretty girl. That's an order, Robbie." "No, Jack, I'll come with—" Robbie broke off with a grunt as Jack's bare foot kicked him hard in the stomach. "I don't have time to argue." Turning away, Jack started swimming, ignoring the pain in his arm, kicking, stroking hard. He wasn't far from the ship now. Then he was there at the ladder, his hands finding the wood rungs. Jack hauled himself up the ladder, clawing his way up. By the time he got to the top and climbed over the rail, flames had engulfed the foremast, climbing the wood as agilely as any topman. With a gasp that was a half-sob, Jack turned, heading for his cabin. He was too late to save his ship, but if he was lucky, he might be able to save the gold, and then, by all that was holy, he'd buy a ship. As he pelted across the weather deck, he saw it had been stripped of everything of value. The guns were gone. The wench was nothing but an empty hulk. Jack glanced left and saw a small figure, swimming, heading for the shore. Robbie had obeyed orders one last time. He'd escape if there was any justice in this world. Reaching the door to his cabin, Jack yanked at it, but it was locked. He felt around for the key, but it was gone. Feeling heat around his back and beneath his feet, he saw the fire was roaring like a hungry monster. It was already past the main cargo hatch. "Damn it!" Jack yelled. He threw himself out the door once, twice, 3 times. He kicked it hard, making him yell from the pain in his bruised foot. Then he threw himself against it with all his remaining strength. The lock gave. Jack scrambled into his cabin and shut the doors behind him. There were so many things he wanted, but wouldn't be able to save. His sea chest. Running over to the bulkhead, Jack felt around for the catch that would open the panel he had installed by a carpenter in London. It clicked, then opened. He began pulling things out, throwing them onto his bunk. 2 small golden goblets, some jewelry, then a handful of coins and the loose gems. Frantically, Jack raised his hand around the inside of the hiding place, making sure there was nothing left. Heading over to his sea chest, he tossed out his old clothes, then wrapped the bigger pieces in a couple of ancient shirts. Then he stuffed the coins and jewelry into his best pair of stockings. Slamming it all back into his sea chest, Jack realized he had no way to lock it. Hastily, he grabbed his baldric, discarding his cutlass, not without a pang, and put the heavy leather strap around it, tightening it as much as he could. The wicked wench screamed, then groaned. His ship's cry sounded almost human. Jack dashed tears from his eyes, then grabbed the chest and stood up with it in his arms. Heading over to the wrecked door, Jack put out a hand to touch it, then jumped back. It was hot to the touch. Smoke trickled in beneath the doors. He coughed. Coughing, Jack retreated, back to the stern windows. Could he get out that way? Those windows weren't very big. Chamba had been a skinny, half-starved kid when he pulled him through. Jack was a grown man. If I smash them all out, he thought, I can jump. Jack put down the chest and ran over to pick up his sword. He began smashing out the glass in his windows with the hilt, hammering at it. The ship lurched and rolled, and suddenly Jack realized the surface of the water looked a lot closer. The wicked wench was going down. Jack looked around his cabin, realizing he was trapped. There was no way out. His ship lurched violently, and everything in the cabin started to slide, first one way, then another. Jack crawled toward the window, dragging the chest. Somehow he'd force himself through it. Just as he reached the windows, Jack realized he had been incredibly stupid. If he jumped holding the chest, the gold was heavy enough to carry it and him to the bottom. He'd have to abandon the chest. The entire cabin was thick with smoke now. The ship heaved and rolled again, knocking Jack off his feet. He slid across the deck. Jack tried to crawl toward the window, but he was disoriented, his lungs screaming for air, and somehow he was still dragging the bloody chest with him. He couldn't seem to make his fingers let go of it. Where were the windows? He couldn't see them. The deck jumped and lurched. Everything slid around again, including Jack. He fetched up against the door, and the chest slammed into him. A tongue of flame erupted through the door, and suddenly his left sleeve was on fire. Yelling, gasping, Jack tried to beat out the flames with his right hand. He heard another hideous groan, and glanced up, just in time to see the overhead skylight collapsing, coming down on top of him. Mercifully, Jack blacked out for a little while. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer aboard the burning ship. He seemed to be somewhere else, somewhere as featureless as his smoke-filled cabin had been, but elsewhere. He could tell because there were no flames, and he could breathe fine, if indeed he was breathing. Guys, there it is. How do I even recap that? But at the beginning there, Beckett takes Amenirdis' ring and throws it overboard. And now, with the illusion being changed, Jack will never see Zerzura again, nor Amenirdis or Chamba. Ugh, my heart. But Jack gets branded a pirate by Beckett, which, like, just to actually see this happening is seriously insane. Like, I remember when I first read this book back in last year, obviously I knew this was coming, but reading it was just something else. And the wench burning, also just insane to actually just witness it happen. This whole ordeal is, it's one of the most infamous pieces of Pirates of the Caribbean lore. And I feel like almost everyone in the Pirates fandom knows about this event in some way or another. It's always the piece of Jack Sparrow's backstory. It's always brought up. And it's just to see it actually unfold in massive detail, and just to read it and to read Jack's emotions and his thoughts as he watches the wench go up in flames. It chills, guys. Seriously, I get chills every time. I mean, when I first read this, I literally almost started to cry because it was so well written that I was like, I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe it. It was so well written that I could not believe that it was even happening. Even though I knew that it was going to happen, reading it it was a whole different experience. And, like, I don't know, I could go on and on and on and on and on about how beautiful this moment is, but how devastating it is for Jack. It just, I don't know, just to see it actually unfold in real time and not just read like a 1-paragraph summary of the event, it just hits different. It hits different, man. It hits so different. But anyway, to get back to the book here, I also love how Jack just throws Beckett overboard in a rage before he tries to swim to the wench. And then we have that emotional moment between Jack and Robbie, where Jack tells Robbie to save himself and go settle down in England on his farm and get married and earn that vicar's collar and everything. And it's just another heartbreaking goodbye, and that is the last we will see of Robbie Greene. I should also mention here on the subject of Robbie, as I didn't mention this at the start of the book, but Robbie Greene is actually based on someone in A.C. Crispin's life, and that was the son of her 2 friends. This boy's name was Robbie Greenberger, and he was only 10 years old when he passed away in 2008 after losing his battle with leukemia. And just like Robbie Greene in the book, real-life Robbie had golden curly hair and was a huge Pirates of the Caribbean fan. So I just wanted to pay tribute to him here. And I also wanted to make sure you pay attention to Jack's arm lighting on fire when he is on the wench there at the end before it sinks, as that will be something I bring up in a little bit. So keep that in mind. But Jack now is in a strange place, and he has a feeling he knows where he is. So let's go back into the book. Jack wasn't sure of anything right now. He could feel his body, feel the pain from his burned left arm and his branded right arm, but it was distant, muffled, as though he'd gulped half a flask of rum. The really good stuff. Jack sat up, then managed to get to his feet. He was able to stand, but that was strange because there didn't seem to be a solid surface beneath him. Where the devil am I? Jack wondered, turning his head. His sea chest was there, with him. Somehow he must have managed to hang on to it. The word devil resounded in his mind, and then, suddenly, he knew where he was. He was wherever Davy Jones met up with dead or dying mariners. Any moment now, old Squidface himself was bound to appear. He'd call Jack's name, and that meant it was all over. But it can't be, he thought. There are so many things I want to do." Jack stood there. After a moment, he shifted his weight and looked around again. It's bloody rude to keep a chap waiting, he thought. But maybe he didn't have to wait. Maybe he could summon Jones. He'd seen the pirate lords do it after all, and there were whispers, rumors, that Jones would sometimes negotiate, make deals, with mariners brave or brazen enough to confront him, then stand up to him. He'd faced Jones before, hadn't he? Jack was desperate enough to try anything. He closed his eyes, recalling the words. He'd have to adapt them a bit. Not for the first time, he wondered what that stuff about binding the queen in her bones was all about. Clearing his throat, Jack spoke aloud. "Davy Jones, I, Jack Sparrow, kin of a pirate lord, call you. I entreat you by your alliance with the brethren of the coast. You gave those mortals power of the sea, binding the queen in her bones, and I am of their blood. I entreat you. Come to me, Davy Jones. I summon you. I summon you. I summon you." He peered into the blackness, but there was nothing there. No monstrous shape. Nothing but the blankness. Bloody hell, I failed. Jack blinked, and he was there. He'd forgotten how dreadful that grayish-white countenance was. The tentacles stirred, reaching out for him. Jones' little eyes had a greedy spark as he regarded Jack. Swallowing hard, Jack steadied himself, assuming an air of confidence he didn't feel. Placing his hands together, he bobbed a bow at the unearthly captain. What title had the pirate lords addressed Jones by? Your squidliness probably wouldn't do. Jones' expression changed, his eyes narrowing with suspicion as they peered through the squid flesh that served him in lieu of human features. "You are not of the Brethren Court," he exclaimed. "Who are you, audacious boy, to summon me thus?" Jack bobbed another bow. "I'm Captain Jack Sparrow, sir." "Ah, I remember you now. Teague's whelp." Jack nodded. "You are young to be a captain, boy," Jones observed, studying him. "Thank you, Captain Jones," Jack said. "I'm really quite good at it, I assure you, and I'd like to remain a captain. Why have you summoned me, Sparrow?" Was Jack mistaken, or did he see a tiny flash of what might have been amusement in those beady little eyes? "Captain Jones," Jack said, marshalling all his considerable negotiating skills, "the fact that I am here, talking to you, means that I'm either dying or dead, correct?" "Dying, yes." "That is just really unfortunate," Jack said. "I'm too young to die. I haven't accomplished half what I wanted to do. Maybe not even a third." "They all say that." Jones clicked his lobster claw impatiently. "Get on with it, boy." "Well, I'm a capable, experienced mariner," Jack said. "Very good hand. I can do anything aboard a ship. If it floats on the water and has sails, I can sail it. I suspect I'd be very useful to you, Captain Jones." Davy Jones eyed him, while Jack held his breath, waiting. Finally, Jones said, "What is it you want? And what have you to trade for it?" "Well, I have my immortal soul," Jack said. "At least, I'm pretty sure I didn't misplace it somewhere along the way." Again, the glint in the tiny eyes that might have indicated amusement. "Go on, Sparrow. What is it you want?" "Well," Jack said, "that will take a little while to enumerate, but I've got it all worked out. Do you mind if I sit down? I've had rather a rough day, all things considered." Without waiting for permission, Jack sat down cross-legged on nothing. "That's better. Now, as to what I want. First of all, there's the matter of my ship." Alright, so that right there is, of course, Jack making the deal with Davy Jones. Of course, this is the deal that entails Jones raising the Wicked Wench, which, of course, is now charred black from it being burned down by Beckett. Jack will be captain of the Wench for 13 years, and then after that, he will serve 100 years aboard the Flying Dutchman. And once again, I mean, to actually witness the deal with Jones actually happening instead of it just, being a passing conversation in Dead Man's Chest and stuff, to actually see it and see Jack beginning to bargain with Jones, like, it's just seeing all these massively important events in Jack's life actually happen, and not just them being told to you in the movie or in a deleted scene or, stuff like that. Actually seeing them unfold, it is so much more impactful, I feel like. And like, I don't know, you guys have probably been hearing all the emotion in my voice this past little while on this podcast episode, but like, just to actually like witness these events unfolding, it just makes me emotional thinking about it. Like, I don't know if it does for you, but for me personally, someone who is very, very invested and emotionally attached to Pirates of the Caribbean, just seeing these incredibly important events happen, it's incredible. It's awesome. But anyway, back to the book. We come now to the epilogue, where Jack has just picked up a crew in Tortuga, and he is ready to set sail on his maiden voyage back as a pirate. While in Tortuga, he picked up some coal to line his eyes, and he is growing his beard out as well, wondering if he should braid it once it gets long enough. And we see that Jack now has 2 gold teeth, since he needed work done on one of them, and had it capped in gold, because why not? Of course, the first gold tooth was from the whole Sun and Stars amulet debacle in the Young Jack Sparrow series, books 5 through 7 to be specific. But we find out Jack negotiated down to every little detail in his bargain with Davy Jones, with the ship being fully armed with plenty of powder and cannonballs when it was risen. We also see that the Wench has a figurehead now, of course being the angel with the raised hand holding a dove. This was added when the ship was raised by Jones, but it was something that Jack did not add in the deal. We see Jack also picked up a new pair of boots that he begins to admire, and afterward he addresses his new crew because he is ready to rechristen his ship. "Mates, please listen up." Jack waved the bottle of rum he was still holding. "Your captain has an announcement to make." His crew stopped murmuring, giving him, or was it the rum, their full attention. "My fellow shipmates," Jack said, accompanying his oration with a sweeping gesture, "today we set out on our new enterprise, seeking adventure, swag, and fame, and perhaps rum and salty wenches." He winked broadly, and his crew responded with guffaws, elbowing each other. Jack had made sure to select only candidates with a sense of humor. This new ship was going to be a happy one. He just knew it. "And so, mates, I would like to inaugurate our maiden voyage by following tradition and smashing a bottle over our lovely angel here. May she keep us safe and guide us on our journeys." Jack leaned over, took aim at the figurehead, raised the bottle of rum, and gave it a vigorous swing, only to stop his hand before the glass touched the wooden angel's wing. He straightened up. "Gentlemen, I find myself incapable of smashing, and thus wasting, a bottle of perfectly good rum. That would be a sin, gents, now, wouldn't it?" Grinning, his men indicated their complete agreement. Jack raised the rum bottle to his lips, grabbed the cork in his teeth, and pulled. The cork came free. He spat it out. "That's better. Mates, I now libate, if there indeed be such a word, which I rather doubt, our lovely angel here. May she watch out for us, keep us safe, and guide us on our journeys." Leaning over, Jack splashed a generous dollop of rum over the angel's head. Then, raising the rum high, he shouted, "I christen thee the Black Pearl." He took a large gulp of the rum, feeling the lovely burn as it coursed its way down his gullet. "Here's to me lovely Black Pearl, gents. Please toast our beautiful lady with me." The crew erupted into assorted cheers. "Huzzah! Hooray for Captain Sparrow! Cheers for the Black Pearl! Huzzah for the Black Pearl!" Climbing back up out of the forecastle, Jack passed the open bottle to his new quartermaster, a villainous-looking Dutchman named Jan Vandergroot. Then he pulled the cork out of another bottle, took another drink, and started that one, making the rounds too. He hadn't managed to find a first mate yet. Maybe there'd be someone in Shipwreck Cove. Barbossa. Even though he'd promised himself that he focused on the future, not the past, Jack found himself thinking of Robbie for a moment. He hoped his friend had reached shore safely, dug up his share of the Pharaoh's reward, then used the gold to go back to England and buy himself a snug little farm. Maybe Robbie would actually pursue that whole seminary and taking orders notion. The lad really would make a good minister. He was probably the only Englishman Jack had ever met that really tried to live his beliefs, yet managed to not be a prig about it. He deserved that farm and that vicar's collar and that rosy-cheeked girl who was plump in all the right places. The cheering was dying down now. Both bottles of rum were empty, which was no surprise. Jack wet his finger and held it up, as a breeze tugged at his loose hair. It was long now, past his shoulders. He nodded. The winds were favorable. Time to go. Cupping his hands around his mouth, Jack bellowed, "All hands, make sail! Prepare to cast off on my order! Helm, stand by to set course! Cheerily, lads!" Jack strode back and forth, watching, evaluating the response of his crew. The great black sails rose as the sweating men heaved on the lines. Jack wasn't satisfied with the effort they were putting into it. "You call that heaving?" he sneered. "I've seen grandmothers that can do better. Try it again with a will and lively, you barnacle-encrusted lummoxes. Heave! Cast off all lines!" The tempo of work increased. Jack looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. "I must get meself a bloody hat." As the Black Pearl got underway, gliding out of the harbor, Jack headed up to the quarterdeck. His helmsman, a young Spaniard named Domingo Velasquez, who had proudly told Jack his father had sailed aboard Venganza under command of Don Rafael, looked at him expectantly. Jack gave him his course. It was odd to be up here on the quarterdeck, with everything painted black, instead of the chestnut color of the Wicked Wench, but he'd known that black paint would hide the burn marks most effectively. And besides, a black ship with black sails, a fast black ship with black sails, was the stuff on which legends were built here in the Caribbean. "You will be pleased when we clear the harbor and put up the gallants and royals," Jack told Domingo. "I believe that with the wind, the Pearl will be the fastest ship you've ever sailed on. Uncatchable. Savvy?" Jack felt confident that his boast would prove true. So far, Davy Jones had fulfilled his side of the bargain admirably. Jack had been very careful when he'd negotiated, making his terms very precise. Captain of the fastest pirate vessel in the Caribbean, Jack thought. Faster than Venganza. Esmeralda's going to lose that red hat of hers. Jack took a deep breath of the sea air and felt his soul sing within him. And I've still got it, my ruddy soul, for 13 more years at least. 13 years. And after that, Jack belonged to Davy Jones and the Flying Dutchman, body and soul, to serve for 100 years. Old Squidface drove a hard bargain. 13 years wasn't all that long a time. Jack shivered, then resolutely gave himself a mental shake. Something would turn up. Somehow he'd get out of the bargain. I'm Captain Jack Sparrow, he thought, and I'm good at getting myself out of situations. I'll figure something out. Jack wandered over to the other side of the quarterdeck, turned his back on the helmsman, then reached beneath Amenirdis' sash to extract Teodalma's compass. He flipped it open to check their heading. Right on course. Jack wasn't taking any chances of running afoul of Teague or any other pirate lords who might be sailing the Caribbean. He was taking the Pearl straight to Shipwreck Cove, and there he would clear his name. He had Christophe's sword, and he knew Esmeralda would speak for him. And after that, Jack grinned. Merchant ships here on the Spanish Main were going to need that white flag. Particularly ships sailing under the flag of the East India Trading Company. Captain Jack Sparrow planned to honor them with special attention. He pulled up both sleeves. The burns on his left arm and the P brand on his right arm were nearly healed and no longer pained him. His first tattoo, which he had put just above the P brand, was still a bit tender, but that was to be expected. Jack flexed his right forearm with satisfaction. The tattoo artist had done a nice job. The tattoo depicted a sparrow, flying free over stylized ocean waves. Most fitting, Jack thought, pulling down his sleeve, because this particular sparrow is going to fly fast and far and free. Jack headed down the ladder to the captain's quarters. He sighed when he looked at the dark walls. He missed his bright colors. Perhaps he'd get the place repainted when he had a bit of time. Most of his belongings had perished in the fire, but his sword, pistol, and of course the contents of his sea chest had survived. He'd gotten a new baldric for his cutlass, one with a fancy silver buckle. Jack rummaged through his sea chest until he pulled out 2 large rectangles of silk. One was white. He needed to be allowed to approach Shipwreck Island for parley. Otherwise, the cannons mounted on the cliff walls would make short work of his pearl, and he couldn't have that. He'd sacrificed too much for this ship. He intended to sail with her for a long, long time. Rather like a marriage, he supposed. The other rectangle he withdrew was his own flag. He was still refining it. Against a black silk background, a white skull was shown in profile. In the upper right-hand corner, a red sparrow took wing. Very classy, Jack thought proudly, though the workmanship can't possibly compare to Amenirdis's. Should I hoist it in honor of the Pearl's maiden voyage? Jack shrugged. Why not? Carrying his flag, he went back out and strolled the weather deck, making sure everything was in order. When he was satisfied that all was shipshape, Jack went over to one of his hands, a burly black man, whose speech patterns reminded him a bit of Chamba. Good morning, Kwame. Morning, Captain Sparrow. It'd be a jolly day, yes? Extremely jolly, Jack agreed. I thought it would be nice to run up me flag on our maiden voyage. Will you do the honors? He handed Kwame the folded black silk. Aye, Captain. Jack headed back up to the quarterdeck. He got there just in time to see his flag ascend to the top of the mast, and flutter there, black as ink and bold as brass. Seeing it, Jack nodded. Turning to Domingo, he smiled. I'd like to take her for a while. The wind had picked up, whipping Jack's unbound hair across his face into his mouth and eyes. Stand by, Domingo, Jack said. Reaching beneath his sash, he found a small, folded bulge of fabric and tugged it free. Esmeralda's red bandana. Jack faced into the wind, and as his hair blew back, he wrapped the bandana around his head and secured it. There, much better, don't you think? Si, Capitan. Stepping over to the wheel again, Jack raised his hands, sliding his fingers over the familiar spokes, caressing them. The wheel was darker than it had been before, but it wasn't quite black. Jack glanced at the binnacle and felt the life of his ship beneath his feet. Black against the blue sky, his flag fluttered. After glancing at the waves, Jack turned the wheel ever so slightly, making sure the sails were precisely as he wanted them. As usual, his ship was yar. If anything, the Black Pearl was even more responsive than she'd been before she'd surged up from the sea bottom in a mighty burst of magic. As Jack had clung to her mast, wide-eyed, his reborn ship had coasted serenely into Tortuga Harbor, the destination Jack had specified to Jones. Jack remembered little of the journey that had taken them from the African coast to Tortuga Harbor. There had been the sensation of incredible, rushing momentum, then a bright flash of green that had dazzled his eyes, and then he was back. She goes good, si, Capitan? Domingo said. Jack smiled. She goes very good indeed, he said. Joy filled him. He was free, and he had his pearl. Surely life could hold no more. Let go the gallants and sheet home, lads, he shouted. Catch that wind and put her to work. Jauntily, Jack Sparrow began to whistle, the same pirate jig that he and Esmeralda had danced to long ago, in another lifetime. Obedient to her captain's will, the Black Pearl followed her dark angel over the azure water, as fast as the wind, as free as the men who sailed her. It was almost as though she knew she was a legend in the making, destined for adventures, both great and terrible. The beginning. And that is the end of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Price of Freedom. But real quick, I want to bring up one thing. When Jack looks at his arms, he has the pirate brand and the tattoo on his right arm, which is really cool that he just got it. And on his left arm, he has burn marks from when he was on the Wicked Wench while it was on fire. If you remember, there is a deleted scene from The Curse of the Black Pearl called No Truth at All. I talked about it on the Curse of the Black Pearl deleted scene episode, and in this deleted scene, Jack shows a bunch of his wounds to Elizabeth while they're on Rum Runner's Isle. And in that scene, Jack shows his left arm, which has burn marks all over it. Like, the detail. Like, come on. But Jack dons the famous bandana here for the first time as well, which used to be Esmeralda's. But, oh my god, what a book! I mean, seriously, I love this book. It is so well written and just tells just a fantastic story, and I cannot believe we have finally finished it. I hope that you have enjoyed this journey through The Price of Freedom as much as I have. And please, if you haven't read the full book, I really recommend you do. Pick up an ebook copy for cheap and read it. There are some parts that I glossed over or just did not mention at all, because if I did, these episodes would be even longer than they are now. Speaking of length, this episode is probably the longest episode of the podcast. If you're listening to it, you will know if it is or not. But I think the title will stay with this episode. I don't think anything is ever going to beat out the length of this episode. So apologies for the length if you prefer shorter episodes. But I know some of you were very eager for the length of this when I said on the last episode that this would probably be the longest episode of the podcast. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode and the whole journey through The Price of Freedom. This has just been so much fun, but we are not done yet. Next up, we'll be covering the Legends of the Brethren Court book series, which takes place after this book, and will bridge the gap between this and The Curse of the Black Pearl. Barbossa will be back, along with some other returning characters, so stay tuned for that. You may have also noticed that this is episode 49, which means the next episode is the 50th episode of the podcast, which is just mind-blowing and crazy, and I can't believe it. But I want to do a special episode for number 50, so we'll see what that ends up being. I still have no idea what it's going to be yet, but for now, thank you for letting me talk for hours and hours about Pirates of the Caribbean. You guys will never understand how much the love this podcast has received means to me. Seriously, I mean it. Like, the love, the messages, and the emails that I've gotten, it has just been amazing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and letting me share the love for this amazing franchise. I will see you all soon for episode 50, and then Legends of the Brethren Court after that. Thank you if you have rated or reviewed the podcast wherever you listen. It means so much to me. And once more, I hope you all enjoyed the coverage of this incredible book. I will see you all next time. Take care. Podcast of the Caribbean is in no way affiliated with Disney. If you want to send me an email or a question, you can send it over to podcastofthecaribbean@gmail.com. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram and Threads at Podcast of the Caribbean, and over on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at PodcastPOTC. I post fun content and trivia over there, so make sure to check those platforms out. And you could also buy merchandise for the podcast over on Dashery. Be sure to keep a weather eye on the horizon, and always remember, dead men tell no tales.